Chapter 17:11. How can I, Yi Chen, be absent from such a grand event? Yi Chen, clad in a purple robe and carrying a long sword on his back, appeared. His purple hair fluttered in the wind. His face was full of sharpness. The young master of Crepe Myrtle Mountain. Many Golden Crow cultivators' expressions changed again. A long time ago, the Yi clan of Crepe Myrtle had produced a world-shaking emperor who was called Sword Emperor of Crepe Myrtle. In terms of prestige, he was even better than the Dark Demon Emperor. A descendant of the Breeze Valley might not be worth paying too much attention to. But with the addition of Crepe Myrtle Mountain that was not inferior to the Breeze Valley, the situation was different. Most importantly, Yi Chen and Laughing at the Heavens were not ordinary juniors. They were peerless sages who were famous throughout the ancient Desolation Realm. Who dared to underestimate them? In the entire ancient Desolation Realm, there were only dozens of peerless true sages in the 9 regions battlefield. When Yi Chen and Laughing at the Heavens returned to the ancient Desolation Realm, they might not be as famous as Lin Sun, but ordinary true sages had to lower their heads in front of them to show respect. Not to mention that they had the support of the 2 ancient forces, the Breeze Valley and Crepe Myrtle Mountain. Who wouldn't be afraid of them? Lin Sun was slightly startled. He hadn't told anyone about his trip. But Old Toad grinned and said, "Big brother, while you were in seclusion, Alu and I were bored, so we casually mentioned it to our old friends." Lin Sun finally understood and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But he also knew that Old Toad and Alu must have done this because they were worried about him. "Are you going to go against the Golden Crow clan? Can you bear the consequences?" Wu Hengtian shouted with a gloomy face. "Haha, so what if we are?" Laughing at the Heavens sneered. "No matter how serious the consequences are, it's nothing compared to fighting side by side with our brothers," Yi Chen said lazily. Their attitude caused the faces of the Golden Crow clan's experts to darken even more. An old monster said coldly, "They're just 2 juniors who don't know their place. We'll just capture them later and teach them a lesson on behalf of their elders, so that they won't meddle in things they shouldn't meddle in the future." Wu Hengtian took a deep breath and said, "That's all we can do." "Really?" Laughing at the Heavens and Ye Chen had strange expressions on their faces. Whoosh! At this moment, there was a ripple in the air. Mi Heng, who was dressed in a jade robe and had a broad forehead and a determined expression, appeared. With clear eyebrows, he nodded slightly to Lin Sun. Then he looked at Sunset Tang Valley in the distance and introduced himself. "Sun Moon Shrine's Mi Hengzhen is here to teach you." Soon after, Yi Mok, who was dressed in a black robe with wide sleeves and had sharp, narrow eyes, also appeared on the scene. He glanced around and said with a smile, "Fortunately, I'm not too late." Then, with his hands clasped behind his back, he stood side by side with Lin Sun and said calmly, "I, Yi Moha of the Origin Sect, swear to go in and out with you today." At this moment, the atmosphere in the surroundings became oppressive, deathly silent, and perfectly silent. The group of Golden Crows stared at Nye Tian, their expressions changing rapidly. Some juniors of the Golden Crow clan were dumbfounded. In an instant, the most outstanding saints of the ancient orthodoxies came one after another to fight side by side with Lin Sun. Who dared to believe it? What a group of arrogant juniors! "Do you really think our Golden Crow clan is easy to bully?" Wu Hengtian's face was livid with anger. He never thought that such an incredible thing would happen. Was this what Lin Sun was relying on? But if Lin Sun thought that he could make Wu Hengtian bow his head and let Tian Ke go under pressure, then it would be a big mistake. The Golden Crow clan had existed since the primeval age, and they'd experienced countless dangers, but they'd never been afraid. Did a group of top saints want to turn the world upside down? Wishful thinking. "Today we will bully you. So what? Tell me, do you want to do it yourself, or do you want us to do it?" Alu shouted. "Don't worry, wait for me." Whoosh! A dazzling sword chi cut through the sky and turned into Yu Jianming, who suddenly landed on the ground. Brother Lin, we finally meet again. Yu Jiaming cupped his hands. Lin soon nodded and said with emotion, I didn't expect that you would come. If I didn't come, I would regret it for the rest of my life. Yu Jiaming showed his snow-white teeth and laughed heartily. It's so lively. Brother Lin, if there is such a grand event next time, you must inform me as soon as possible. Look, many people came before me. In a clear and melodious voice, Ji Xingyao, dressed in white, floated over. She was as beautiful as an immortal and had a peerless appearance. There was a trace of complaint in her tone, which made Lin Sun smile bitterly and touch his nose. This time, he didn't intend to tell anyone. Miss Ji is right. I also hate to be late than others. Boom! A golden rainbow circled the ground, causing the earth to tremble. The golden light spilled out and reflected a dignified and strong figure. His whole body was golden and emitted a terrible and violent aura. It was Yuan Fatian, a descendant of Yu Yang. Monkey, you are also here? Alu was surprised. Yuan Fatian said coldly, Why can't I come? Alu said, Then, the little golden-winged rock is also here? Yes. What answered him was a proud and aloof voice. A strong wind blew in the sky, and a golden-winged rock suddenly arrived. Its wings were like clouds in the sky, flowing with golden light and boundless divine power. Suddenly, he transformed into a young man with an ordinary appearance, and only his eyes were golden and blazing like the scorching sun. The little golden-winged rock. In the distance, all the people of the Golden Crow bloodline were stunned. They felt that their eyes were blurred, and their expressions changed countless times. In the past, it was difficult to see a peerless sage. But now, the most famous peerless sages in the ancient Desolation realm had come one after another. Who wouldn't be shocked and trembling? What shocked Wu Hengtian and the others the most was that these peerless sages had all come for Lin Sun. For Lin Sun, these young figures dared to shed all pretenses of cordiality with the Golden Crow bloodline. Patriarch, what should we do? It's a bit tricky. An old monster sent a voice transmission worriedly. Looking at the peerless sages who came to support Lin Sun, which one of them didn't have a terrifying ancient force behind them? Which one of them wasn't a peerless figure in the true sage realm? This is the territory of the Golden Crow bloodline. They deserve to die for daring to come here. Wu Hengtian gritted his teeth and said coldly, Today, if the Golden Crow bloodline bowed to a group of juniors, they would definitely become the laughingstock of the ancient Desolation realm. He took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, Lin Sun, is this all you have? Do you have more? His voice was like thunder. Yes. What answered him was a sonorous voice that sounded like swords clashing. A mighty young man bathed in divine flames tore through the void and arrived with an unbridled aura. It was Qi Lingxiao. Wu Hengtian's face darkened. The powerhouses of the Golden Crow bloodline were speechless, and their expressions were unsettled. When had the Golden Crow bloodline ever been treated like this? Without a doubt, the current situation was terrible, and Wu Hengtian and the others were caught unprepared. No matter how angry they were, they didn't dare to act rashly. They couldn't help but be fearful of this situation. However, just when they thought it was all over, there was another fluctuation in the void nearby. Looks like we're not too late. That's for the best. It feels like we're back in the 9 regions battlefield. How great it was when we fought side by side. Amidst the chatter, a man and a woman walked out of the scene. The man was tall and imposing, and the woman was beautiful and slender, like a fairy walking out of the rosy clouds. They were Emperor Xiaohao and Ruo Wu. For a moment, Wu Hengtian was dumbfounded. As for the other powerhouses of the Golden Crow bloodline, they were also silent, their minds numb. Was this the power of Lin Sun, the #1 cultivator in the 9 regions battlefield? In the distance, Lin Sun, Old Toad, Alu, the big black bird, laughing at the heavens, Yechen, Yu Jiaming, Mi Hengzhen, Yi Move, a group of peerless sages stood side by side. Each of them could be called a peerless genius, and they were as elegant as the brightest stars in the sky. Now, they were all gathered around Lin Sun. Such a scene was enough to be recorded in the history of the ancient Desolation realm, and become a story that would be talked about by future generations. After all, it was bound to be very, very difficult to gather these most brilliant young people who represented the best path of cultivation in the ancient Desolation realm. At this moment, Lin Sun couldn't help but feel a surge of blood and pride. Lin Sun had fought alone until now. Although he had made countless enemies, he also had a group of friends who treated him with sincerity. Now, they came one after another and chose to fight side by side with him again. Old Toad, Alu, and the others were also excited at this moment. In a trance, they recalled the bloody fighting days in the Nine Regions battlefield. At that time, they laughed and talked about drinking the enemy's blood and killing to their heart's content. But now, their opponents had changed to the Golden Crow bloodline. In front of the Sunset Valley, the atmosphere became more and more oppressive. The expressions of all the experts of the Suncrow clan were extremely gloomy and unsightly to the extreme. Such a scene caused them to feel that it was extremely difficult to deal with, and they had the feeling that they were in a dilemma and had no way to stop. Forget it. Suddenly, Wu Hengtian let out a long sigh. Even if we don't care about the monks, we should care about the Buddha. You juniors all come from different forces. Although my Golden Crow bloodline is not afraid of you, as fellow cultivators of the ancient Desolation region, we can't be too ruthless. The powerhouses of the Golden Crow bloodline were all stunned. Did the patriarch change his mind? Lin Sun and the others looked on coldly. No one believed that an old monster like Wu Hengtian would bow his head so easily. Sure enough, the next moment, Wu Hengtian said, "In order to avoid hurting the innocent, I can give you a chance to take Tian Ke away. The premise is that you have to fight with the powerhouses of the Golden Crow bloodline for 3 rounds. If you win all 3 rounds, I will fulfill your wish and let you take Tian Ke away." After a pause, a glint of killing intent appeared in his eyes. He looked directly at Lin Sun and said, "If you lose 1 round, haha, I'm afraid you will lose your life here, not to mention taking Tian Ke away." Chapter 17:12. Old Toad and Alu couldn't help frowning as soon as he finished. What a shameless old thing! Realizing that the situation was not right, he came up with another plan and only targeted Lin Sun. It seemed like he was taking a step back, but in fact, he wanted to kill Lin Sun at the lowest cost. The eyes of the Golden Crows lit up when they heard this. "Lin Sun, do you agree?" Wu Hengtian asked in a low voice. Before Lin Sun could speak, Alu couldn't help cursing, "Old thing, you're the patriarch of the Golden Crows. Don't you feel shameless?" Old Toad asked straightforwardly, "Big brother, as long as you say the word, we brothers will kill our way into the Golden Crows with you. There's no need to pay attention to this old bastard." Xiaohao and Yechen nodded. "Humph, kill our way in? You're too arrogant. Even if you're an emperor-to-be, you have to consider the consequences of breaking into my Sunset Tang Valley." Wu Hengtian's expression was cold. "If it weren't for the power behind you, do you really think I would make such a concession?" Old Toad wanted to say something but was stopped by Lin Sun. Lin Sun looked at Wu Hengtian coldly and said, "You'll hand over Senior Tian Ke if we win all 3 battles?" Wu Hengtian answered without hesitation, "Yes. But remember, you have to fight alone and you have to die." Old Toad and the others frowned even more. This old bastard wasn't making a concession. He was clearly planning to kill Lin Sun. But Lin Sun looked very calm and said, "What if you go back on your word?" Wu Hengtian couldn't help laughing. "Little thing, you underestimate me too much. Everyone here can bear witness to what happens today." "Lin Sun, are you really going to agree?" Xiaohao frowned and asked. "The Golden Crows have been fierce for a long time. They won't care about face in the 3 battles. In order to kill you, they'll probably send out some Saint Kings." "It's okay. I know what I'm doing." Lin Sun smiled. "But what if they go back on their word?" Xiaohao was still worried. Lin Sun said calmly, "It doesn't matter. Brother Xiaohao, you don't think I'm here just to save people, do you?" Xiaohao was shocked. A bold idea came to his mind and he looked at Lin Sun in a different way. Where did this guy get his confidence from? I agree. Let's begin. Lin Sun didn't want to talk nonsense. He rose into the air and stood in the void. His figure was lonely and his eyebrows were calm. If he could rescue Tian Ke, that would be even better. It didn't matter if the other party went back on his word. Wu Hengtian couldn't help but be stunned. He didn't think that Lin Sun would agree so readily. Not only him, even the other powerful warriors of the Golden Crow clan were slightly stunned. Is this kid really fearless, or is he acting recklessly? If he didn't have the help of those peerless sages from the major forces, how could he rely on these 3 battles to save people? What wishful thinking! After that, Wu Hengtian couldn't help but reveal a cold smile. He waved his hand and said, "Heng Hai, go deal with this brat. Remember, don't show any mercy." A robust man with hair that was like a halberd and a fierce and dignified bearing walked out. His eyes were terrifying like surging lightning. From afar, he was like a towering mountain, unattainable and unshakable. Wu Henghai, a great sage and one of the holy elders of the Golden Crow clan, had a high status and was extremely famous in the ancient Desolation realm. He was known as the first butcher of the Great Sage realm in the past 800 years. This person's battle prowess might not be the strongest among the Great Sage realm experts in the world. However, the number of opponents who had died at his hands was so many that no one would dare to claim to be the strongest among the Great Sage realm experts. This was the origin of the name Butcher. Yechen, Mi Hengzhen and others couldn't help but narrow their eyes, and a touch of anger appeared between their eyebrows. Wu Hengtian, you are too shameless. You sent a great sage whose hands are stained with blood to deal with a young man of the true sage realm. Don't you have any shame? Yimo shouted. Wu Hengtian smiled leisurely and said, "There is no restriction on the level of cultivation in this battle. If you think that Lin Sun is not a match for him, you can ask him to admit defeat and kill himself." The patriarch of an ancient clan, the master of the Sunset Tang Valley in the Saint Hermit Land, said such shameless words. Yimo and the others couldn't help but widen their horizons. I've never seen such a shameless person. The big black bird was angry. It thought that it was shameless enough, but compared to Wu Hengtian, it was nothing. Even the powerhouses of the Golden Crow clan felt uncomfortable. It seemed that even they didn't expect the patriarch to send such a terrifying existence like Wu Henghai in the first battle. It was obvious that he wanted to kill Lin Sun as soon as possible with an absolute attitude. Of course, this arrangement was indeed a little dishonorable, but as long as they could kill Lin Sun, it wasn't a bad thing. Unexpectedly, Lin Sun was still very calm despite being treated like this. He only uttered 4 words lightly. "Come up and fight." His words shook the universe and drowned out all the voices in the field. Old Toad, Alu, and the others wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. They knew that Lin Sun had made up his mind, so they couldn't help but worry. An ordinary great saint was indeed not qualified to be taken seriously by true Saint Zhu Xiu. But Wu Henghai wasn't an ordinary great saint. Even if he hadn't embarked on the path of Zhu Xiu, he had already firmly suppressed Lin Sun in terms of realm. This also meant that the first battle was destined to be very unfair before it even began. But it was too late for the crowd to dissuade him because Lin Sun had already made his decision. "If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." Wu Henghai stepped into the void and the void cracked under his feet. His figure was like an infinitely tall mountain, becoming more and more majestic. This was a kind of greatness in momentum. This was a kind of power that belonged to the great saint realm. If it was any other true saint here, they would only feel a sense of helplessness like an insignificant ant. Not to mention fighting, even their fighting spirit would be shaken. Rumble! The clouds in all directions collapsed, and the sky darkened. Wu Henghai's body was surrounded by blazing golden divine flames, and his aura was so strong that it covered the sky and covered the earth, causing many people in the field to hold their breath. This was the real power of a great saint. It was vast and immeasurable, like a curtain covering the sky, and mountains, rivers, and all things seemed extremely small in front of it. However, all this couldn't affect Lin Sun's mind. He had already comprehended the mystery of greatness, and even had a deeper understanding of greatness than some strong people who had stepped into the great saint realm. The reason why he hadn't stepped into the great saint realm was that he lacked an opportunity. The atmosphere was oppressive, and the air seemed to be condensed. The chilling atmosphere changed the color of the world. In the field, all eyes were nervously watching. This was an unfair duel, and it was also a battle that was rarely seen throughout the ages. One was the number one person in the 9 regions battlefield, a peerless figure who had become a true saint at the great saint realm, and the other was Wu Henghai, who was named the first butcher of the great saint realm in 800 years. Looking at the entire ancient desolation realm, this could be called a shocking battle. Lin Sun's clothes were fluttering, and his black eyes were cold. The terrifying power in his body, like lava, had long been running. Die! Without any nonsense, Wu Henghai attacked without hesitation. As he waved his hand, it was as if he had picked up a fierce burning sun. He looked like an ancient god of death, and his momentum was violent and had the power to incinerate the universe. So strong. Xiao Hao and the others all narrowed their eyes. They could tell with one strike that Wu Henghai was a top figure even in the great saint realm. He was extremely terrifying. Wu Hengtian couldn't help but reveal a hint of admiration. He could tell that Wu Henghai didn't underestimate or hold back. Instead, Wu Hengtian did as Wu Henghai had instructed, intending to kill Lin Sun with a thunderous force. Many strong people of the Golden Crow bloodline were also shocked. In the ancient desolation realm, it was extremely rare to see a battle between great saints. Even though they were of the same clan, most of them had never seen Wu Henghai's means, so they were shocked at first sight. Boom! In the face of this attack, a big abyss suddenly appeared around Lin Sun, swallowing the sky and the earth, covering all directions. The void suddenly exploded, and the power of the nearby Zhou Su was drawn and swallowed, turning the place where Lin Sun stood into a black hole. When Wu Henghai's palm slammed down, the palm energy that was as dazzling as the sun suddenly exploded along with a deafening roar of collision. It turned into a rolling rain of fire and light, and was devoured by the abyss around Lin Sun until not a single drop was left. Boundless devouring scripture. The supreme Taoist scripture that the master of Tongtian relied on to dominate the heavens and conquer the Zhou Su. It was an ancient supreme skill that was based on the big abyss devouring the sky. At this moment, in front of Sunset Tang Valley, a terrifying and boundless power burst out. This, Xiao Hao and the others were all shocked. They hadn't seen Lin Sun for half a year, and he was much stronger than they had expected. It was like he was a completely different person. Wu Hengtian's expression changed slightly. How could the absolute power of the true saint realm be so heaven-defying? One should know that Wu Henghai didn't hold back and used the true power of the great saint realm, but he was still defeated like a piece of paper. As for the powerhouses of the Golden Crow branch, their eyeballs almost fell out. They had long heard that Lin Sun's combat power was heaven-defying, like a peerless monster. Today they realized that this guy was even stronger than the rumors said. It was simply beyond their imagination. Kill. Wu Henghai's expression also changed slightly, but he was experienced in killing. Without hesitation, he pressed his palm again. Buzz. In an instant, thousands of suns rose into the sky, wanting to burn the heaven and earth. The nearby mountains and rivers instantly evaporated, turning into ashes and disappearing. The void was melted and full of holes. The supreme inheritance of the Golden Crow branch, thousand suns burning sky. At this moment, Lin soon moved like a big abyss moving horizontally. The heaven and earth twisted and collapsed with his steps, producing a terrible explosion. That domineering and boundless power was like the god of destruction coming out. In the blink of an eye, thousands of suns exploded in front of Lin soon one by one. The power contained in each of the suns was enough to kill any true saint. But in front of Lin Sun, they were like broken bubbles. They looked so weak and fragile. For a moment, the suns between heaven and earth exploded, and the roar was endless. The blazing torrent of flames raged, showing a shocking scene. And Lin Sun was like a black hole in the painting, swallowing all the divine flame turbulence along the way. Chapter 17:14. Rumble. Heaven and earth trembled as the surging torrent of flames was swallowed by Lin Sun, who was moving through the void like a black hole. Exclamations rang out incessantly. Many people's expressions changed. What kind of terrifying Taoist technique was this? It was too domineering. Ridiculous. Isn't he afraid of exploding with such a technique? In the void, Wu Henghai's expression changed. Then he sneered and charged forward with all his might. Flames surged all over his body as if he wanted to burn the sky. Golden divine flames turned into palm force and fist prints that crushed forward. But no matter how he attacked, they were all swallowed by the abyss around Lin Sun. From afar, Lin Sun's figure was like a bottomless pit. Such a shocking scene left Old Toad, Alu, and the others dumbfounded. They had seen Lin Sun use the star engulfing way before, but it was a furnace that contained tens of thousands of Taoists and developed tens of thousands of technique. It was upright and had the power to suppress the past and present. But now, Lin Sun was completely domineering. No matter how many techniques you used, you couldn't escape the fate of being crushed, plundered, and devoured. The abyss blotted out the sky and swallowed everything. Wu Hengtian's expression was uncertain as he transmitted his voice. Do you know what kind of inheritance this is? How can it be so domineering? The higher-ups of the Golden Crow branch nearby were silent. They were also trembling because they couldn't tell the origin of such a technique. But there was no doubt that such an inheritance was extremely terrifying. Wu Henghai was a great saint, a ruthless character like a butcher. A casual attack was enough to kill a true saint. But now all his attacks were devoured. This was too unbelievable. Who wouldn't be shocked? Suddenly, Wu Henghai let out a roar. I'd like to see how long you can last after devouring so much energy. His expression was cold. His body circulated with monstrous divine flames as he performed the Golden Crow's unique technique. Sky burning ember. In an instant, an endless rain of flames fell like comets from the ninth heaven. It was dazzling and blazing, burning fiercely and covering the sky. Every wisp of flame had the power to burn mountains and boil seas. Everyone in the field was horrified. The full power of a great saint was undoubtedly displayed at this moment. Rumble. But as Lin Sun moved his body, the sky collapsed and was swallowed by the black hole. The boundless rain of fire was also swept away with a rumble. Looking at Lin Sun again, he was unscathed, but his breath was more terrifying than before, like an ancient wild beast that had eaten its fill, giving off an overbearing aura that could devour the ages. Wu Henghai's eyes widened, and he almost couldn't believe his eyes. Was this really the power that a true Saint Realm expert could possess? Could there really be a boundless black hole within this kid's body? If it was any other cultivator that dared to forcefully seize another's attack, that cultivator would have probably been instantly blasted into bits a long time ago. But Lin Sun safe and sound. At this moment, it wasn't just Wu Henghai. All the experts of the Golden Crow bloodline were stunned. Their bodies and minds trembled in disbelief. Continue. Lin Sun seemed to want to continue as he stared at Wu Henghai with deep eyes. Within his body, all of the attacks that he had devoured earlier had turned into a boiling power that surged violently within the abyss created by the great endless devouring scripture. That feeling was indescribably wonderful. It seemed as if the abyss was boundless, and it could devour all the energy in the universe. This was the Tao left behind by the master of Skirich. Devour the heavens and devour the earth, seize the momentum of the universe, and use it for myself. My body is immeasurable, and my techniques are boundless. It was precisely this cultivation that allowed the master of Skirich to sweep through the 9 heavens and defeat an unknown number of Emperor Realm experts. Now Lin Sun could only be considered to have touched the threshold. Otherwise, he could instantly tear Wu Henghai, a great saint, apart and devour him with a single thought. Die! Wu Henghai was furious, and he couldn't keep his face any longer. He let out a shrill howl, and in a flash, he displayed his trump card. Rumble! An enormous golden crow Dharma idol that was tens of thousands of meters long appeared behind Wu Henghai, causing its might to be much stronger than before. He attacked once more without holding back. However, it was destined to be in vain. In merely a moment, his expression had become extremely ugly and solemn. Because no matter how strong his strength was, and how powerful his momentum was, he couldn't shake Lin Sun in the slightest. Instead, Lin Sun operated the abyss and devoured all of his attack. That unparalleled and domineering attitude caused the scene to fall into a deathly silence. Countless people were dumbfounded and gasped. Was he still human? This is impossible! Wu Henghai roared. His eyes were about to split open, and he found it difficult to accept. Since he started cultivating, he had never encountered such a setback, and it made him feel cold. Do you know what is called the absolute peak? Lin Sun finally started to take the initiative. He stepped forward in the void, and his aura was terrifying like the abyss, causing the heavens and the earth to tremble. Wu Henghai's expression was gloomy. Even true Saint Zhu Xiu can't have such means. Then do you know what is called creating an invincible technique at the absolute peak? Lin Sun was calm, and with every step he took, the aura around him rose steadily. It seemed to be slow, but in fact, all of his essence, qi, and spirit had already enveloped the surroundings and firmly locked onto Wu Henghai. Creating an invincible technique at the absolute peak? Wu Henghai was stunned. Although he was a great saint, he had never come into contact with the path of the absolute peak, let alone know the secrets of the invincible technique. You don't know anything, and yet you're shouting. Don't you think that you're very stupid and ignorant? Lin Sun's voice was cold, and it carried undisguised mockery. There were some things that he didn't say that involved some of his own secret. Otherwise, it would only bring more damage to Wu Henghai. Even so, his 3 questions had already made Wu Henghai feel humiliated. He was almost unable to keep his face after being taught a lesson by a junior. You're courting death. Blue veins popped on Wu Henghai's forehead. He let out a roar and charged at Lin Sun with all his might. It wasn't that he was flustered and exasperated, but as Lin Sun approached, he felt a suffocating pressure, as if there was nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. Under such pressure, the only thing he could do was to take the initiative to attack and disintegrate Lin Sun's continuously rising power. Bang! At this moment, Lin Sun made his move. He pressed out a finger. Boom! The power of the abyss, which had already devoured an unknown amount of power, was all gathered in this finger and suddenly exploded. It was impossible to describe the terror of this finger. Wherever the finger passed, the sky fell, the earth cracked, and the void shattered. Everything showed signs of annihilation. Wu Henghai, who was charging at Lin Sun, was pierced through by the finger. Then, his head, neck, limbs, and torso exploded inch by inch. Blood and bones were all annihilated by the terrifying finger force. From afar, it gave people the feeling that Lin Sun had erased a terrifying figure of the great saint realm like Wu Henghai from the world with a single finger. His body and soul were destroyed and his soul scattered. Rumble, the finger force crushed the void for 90,000 feet before disappearing. The 90,000 feet of the void was a scene of annihilation. Dead silence. Old Toad, Alu, Xiaohao, and the others all widened their eyes. They were shocked by the power of this blow, and their scalps went numb. This kind of power was so overbearing that it was appalling. Wu Hengtian and the other experts of the Golden Crow lineage trembled as they cried out involuntarily in shock. How is this possible? No! How could he be so powerful? Wu Henghai, the holy elder of the Golden Crows, the first butcher of the great saint realm in the past 800 years, had an extremely high status in the clan. At first, before the battle, they all thought that the arrangement of the patriarch was a bully. They thought that it was not worth the trouble to deal with a top true saint like Wu Henghai. But who would have thought that Wu Henghai would be obliterated in just one finger? How could these powerful warriors of the Golden Crow clan accept such a bloody scene that had suddenly happened? There was an uproar in the field, and everyone looked at Lin Sun in a different way. This guy crossed a great realm and killed a great saint with one finger. Even in the long history of the ancient Desolation realm, such an earth-shattering thing had rarely happened. Wu Hengtian, I won the first round, Lin Sun said indifferently in the void. At the same time, he was experiencing the battle just now, and finally realized how terrifying the infinite devouring scripture was when used in battle. Humph! Wu Hengtian snorted coldly, his face livid, and his eyes full of deep-seated hatred. Lin Sun's victory also caught him off guard. Especially when Wu Henghai was killed, it was like a stick hitting his head, and Wu Hengtian was stunned. At this moment, he suddenly took a few deep breaths and said, "Little bastard, don't be complacent too early. There are still 2 more battles. Cut the crap, just bring it on." Lin Sun put his hands behind his back, his expression calm. "Go and call Elder Jiu here," Wu Hengtian shouted. There was a commotion among the Golden Crows. Elder Jiu Hengzhen, an existence at the consummation of the Great Saint Realm, had been in seclusion for the past 1,000 years, concentrating on breaking through to the King Saint Realm. Among the 13 Saint Elders of the Golden Crows, Wu Hengzhen was undoubtedly the strongest. Even Wu Hengtian, the patriarch, was not as powerful as Wu Hengzhen. If it wasn't for Lin Sun's overwhelming strength, Wu Hengtian would not have disturbed Wu Hengzhen, because the latter was at the critical moment of breaking through to the King Saint Realm. Big brother. Suddenly, there was a ripple in the void, and a handsome man in a black robe appeared in the field. With his appearance, a terrifying and invisible power spread out, disturbing the wind and clouds. This man was Wu Hengzhen. There is a faint aura of the realm of Tao on this person. It is very likely that he has touched the threshold of the King Saint Realm. Even if he hasn't broken through, his combat strength can be said to be the peak of the Great Saint Realm. The big black bird revealed a shocked expression. Old Toad, Alu, and Xiaohao were also awestruck, revealing a solemn expression. The Great Saint Realm was also divided into 3 levels: initial, middle, and late. Wu Henghai, for example, belonged to the middle of the Great Saint Realm. But compared with Wu Hengzhen, Wu Henghai was nothing. Because Wu Hengzhen was already at the peak of the consummation of the Great Saint Realm, only 1 step away from stepping into the King Saint Realm. Wu Hengtian actually sent such a terrifying character to fight. It was obvious that he was stimulated by Lin Sun's previous performance. Thanks to Book Friend 46961842 for your generous reward, which made me the 29th leader of the Heavenly Sons. Thanks to Book Friend 37440253 and everyone for their rewards and monthly tickets. Goldfish thanks everyone. Chapter 1716. The moment Wu Hengzhen appeared, the morale of the Golden Crow clan was boosted. Old Toad and the others had grave expressions on their faces. One was at the Great Perfection True Saint Realm, while the other was at the Great Perfection Eminent Saint Realm. However, the difference between them was not as simple as a realm. Under such circumstances, Lin Sun was at an absolute disadvantage in terms of cultivation, even though he had the unique power of absolute peak. Who wouldn't be worried? Ninth brother, this kid just killed your sixth brother. Henghai Wu Hengtian quickly sent a sound transmission, informing Wu Hengzhen of the situation of the battle. Hearing this, Wu Hengzhen's eyes suddenly shot out a frightening killing intent. His cold face was filled with indifference as he said, "I will make you pay with your life." Boom. His voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when he'd already charged up explosively into the sky, and his gaunt figure revealed a boundlessly large, perfect, and boundless aura. Strands of violet divine flames coiled around his body, and they caused him to emanate a dignified, divine, and lofty, imposing aura. Clang! Immediately, a pitch-black spear appeared in his hand. He pointed the tip of the spear at Lin Sun in the distance and said expressionlessly, "In my eyes, there is no difference between the strong and the weak. I will never show mercy to such a character." His voice was sonorous, and his killing intent surged into the 9 heavens. The expressions of Old Toad and the others couldn't help but change. A great sage at the peak of the great perfection realm caused even true sages like them to feel a suffocating pressure. Just from this point alone, it was enough to prove that Wu Hengzhen was much stronger than Wu Henghai. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes slightly. At this moment, he felt a stinging pain on his skin, and at the same time, he felt an oppressive force pressing down on his face. He realized just how terrifying Wu Hengzhen was. Whoosh! Without the slightest hesitation, and as if he couldn't be bothered to waste his breath, Wu Hengzhen attacked, and he seemed to be incomparably direct, fierce, and powerful. His figure flashed and disappeared out of thin air. The next moment, a pitch-black spear appeared in front of Lin out of thin air. It was a simple spear, but it was as if it was held in the hands of the god of death, and it was unparalleled. Rumble! The void exploded. Lin Sun punched out, and the fist energy was like a vast abyss, colliding with the spear. With a bang, Lin Sun's body was shaken and staggered back. Whoosh! Without the slightest hesitation, Wu Hengzhen was cold like a god of death as he seized the opportunity to attack once more. The shadows of his spear flickered and covered the heavens and the earth. Every single spear shadow contained the terrifying energy of the great Saint Laws, and it was profound, unfathomable, and swift and fierce to the extreme. Bang! Soon, Lin Sun was shaken back again, with his blood and chi surging all over his body. As expected, he's not simple. Wu Hengzhen's eyes revealed a hint of surprise. But he didn't slow down at all. Holding the spear horizontally, he didn't give Lin any chance to breathe at all. Rumble! At this time, Lin Sun had already operated all his cultivation to the extreme. His body was like a furnace of the Great Way, integrating all the mysteries of Battle Saint technique, fury of Yazi, leakless eternity, and so on. This was the origin of the Tao. Inheritances such as the 9 transformations of the Calamity Dragon, the profound Sword Sutra, the 9 strikes of the heaven-shaking Tao, and the first slash of the heavenly origin were also being displayed within his cauldron. This was the origin of the law. One Tao and one Dharma, deduced to an unprecedented level and released with the Great Furnace Scripture, could be regarded as the most powerful means Lin Sun had mastered now. In the face of such a terrifying opponent as Wu Hengzhen, Lin Sun didn't dare to hold back. For a time, there was a turbulence above the sky, divine light swept across, and Tao light danced wildly. In just a moment, the two had fought hundreds of times, until the sky was dark, the sun and the moon were dim, and the terrible aftermath swept across, roaring incessantly. However, Lin Sun had been at a disadvantage, constantly being shaken back and suppressed. After all, the power controlled by the Great Saint Realm was too strong. Even though Lin Sun was invincible in the peerless true Saint Realm. But in the face of Wu Hengzhen, who was at the peak of the Great Saint Realm, he still suffered a great loss in terms of cultivation. Kill! Wu Hengzhen pressed forward step by step, as if he was unstoppable. His fierce and domineering bearing caused all the experts of the Golden Crow clan to be dazzled, and they were extremely excited. Even some of the older generation were amazed and sighed with emotion. My ninth brother has been regarded as a natural cultivation seed since he was young. His talent is outstanding, and his physique is excellent. What's more rare is that his temperament is calm and cold. He is obsessed with cultivation and doesn't care about worldly affairs. In this way, he can far surpass his brothers on the road of cultivation. Wu Hengtian had a relaxed expression as he sighed with emotion. If it wasn't for this little bastard being troublesome, even I wouldn't be willing to disturb ninth brother's cultivation. After all, he's only a step away from stepping foot into the Saint King realm. His voice was full of pride. The nearby Golden Crow experts nodded in agreement. Wu Hengzhen was indeed an anomaly among the old monsters of the Golden Crow branch. His foundation and combat strength could be called the peak of the Great Saint realm. The situation is not good. At the same time, Old Toad, Alu, and Xiaohao couldn't help but worry. The gap was too obvious. The peerless true saint realm could kill ordinary great saints across realms, which was already shocking. For example, Lin Sun's killing of Wu Heng-hai just now seemed very heaven-defying. But this time, his opponents were all at the peak of the Great Saint realm, and it was almost impossible to kill them across realms. In fact, Lin Sun had also discovered this fact at this point in the battle. His combat strength could be said to be invincible in the true saint realm, and he could kill a great saint like Wu Heng-hai across realms. But to kill someone like Wu Hengzhen across realms, it was already impossible. Kill! Wu Hengzhen swept his spear and attacked again. From the beginning to the end, he had been chasing Lin Sun relentlessly, pressing him step by step, and this time was no exception. He looked cold and emotionless, but in his heart, he could not believe it. Normally, a true saint would not be taken seriously at all. But now, Lin Sun was actually able to withstand his attacks until now. This greatly surprised and shocked him. And when he attacked, he became more and more impolite, full of killing intent. If such a heaven-defying little monster was allowed to survive, it went without saying that he was bound to become a great threat to the Golden Crow branch. Boom! Wu Hengzhen's spear was like lightning, thunder, wind, and fire wantonly attacking. Faintly, there was an extremely vague aura of the realm of Tao. Lin Sun's pressure doubled. In a moment, this boy will die without a doubt. Wu Zhentian, who was watching the battle in the distance, made an inference and vowed. Many people nodded. Everyone could see that Lin Sun was just a cornered beast fighting, not far from death. Bang! When he was shaken back again, Lin Sun's black eyes were filled with coldness. He suddenly looked up at the sky, and a voice came out from his lips. "Tribulation is coming." It was just 2 words, but it seemed to have a strange power that shook people's hearts, surging above the 9th heaven. Wu Hengzhen, who was originally rushing to kill Lin Sun, seemed to be aware of something. His body suddenly stopped moving, and he suddenly retreated far away. He also looked up at the sky, revealing a look of disbelief. Almost at the same time, all the people present felt a throb in their hearts, and looked up at the sky in unison. Then, the azure sky suddenly darkened, and ink-like tribulation clouds gathered at an incredible speed. The daytime seemed to fall into an eternal night. The tribulation clouds were as heavy as lead, funnel-shaped, rotating slowly in the sky, silent, but with a supreme breath of the way of heaven. All the people present, regardless of their cultivation, were frightened, and there was a sign of restlessness and disorder in their state of mind. Moreover, the higher one's cultivation was, the more terrifying the feeling was. "Retreat, get away from here!" Wu Hengtian roared. There was no need to remind everyone present to avoid this area. Even Old Toad, Alu, and the others were shocked and doubtful, and stayed far away. The breath of this tribulation made them feel frightened and uneasy. Boom! In the depths of the tribulation clouds, A muffled thunder sounded, rumbling and surging, and all things were chilling. Many strong practitioners only felt a buzzing sound in their ears, and saw stars in front of their eyes. The sound of the tribulation thunder almost made them lose control of their Taoist heart. Even old monsters like Wu Hengtian were terrified, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. What kind of tribulation was this? Why was the breath so heaven-defying? It was even like the gathering of taboo force. Xiaohao's eyes were shining and he looked shocked. He murmured, "Brother Lin is walking on the road of integration of three paths. He broke the killing of the forbidden Tao long ago and became a saint in the three paths of qi refining, body refining, and spirit refining. This path once existed during the primeval times of the ancient desolation region, yet it was severed after that. Until now, only Brother Lin has stepped foot onto such a heaven-defying path towards the Tao in the entire ancient desolation region. What he is facing now must be the Great Saint Tribulation, which is naturally far from being comparable to ordinary people. Even a saint who has reached the end of the path can't trigger such a rare Great Tribulation. But why does Brother Lin suddenly want to cross the tribulation at this time? Doesn't he know that once he is disturbed by external forces, he is very likely to fail the tribulation and end up in ashes? Xiaohao frowned. He couldn't understand Lin Sun more and more. Others were also surprised and doubtful. Boom! In the sky, the tribulation clouds became darker and darker. In the depths of the black clouds, dazzling tribulation thunder as thick as pythons and dragons rolled and surged. Strangely, these tribulation thunder sometimes turned into palaces, sacred trees, fierce birds, beasts, and sometimes into sabers, spears, swords, halberds, seals, pagodas, and cauldrons. In the end, illusory figures emerged, like the thunder spirits in myths and legends, patrolling in the tribulation clouds. The shocking scenes caused everyone present to gasp and feel a chill run down their spines. They had never heard of such a great tribulation, not to mention knowing it. There was almost no similar record in the historical books. Wu Hengtian had to give up the plan of continuing to attack Lin Sun and stay far away. His expression was uncertain, with surprise and coldness. He didn't expect that Lin Sun would cross the Great Saint Tribulation at this time and attract such an incredible tribulation. Did this guy want to kill himself with the power of the Thunder Tribulation? Wu Hengtian couldn't help sneering at the thought of this. The trick of killing people with the help of the Thunder Tribulation had existed since ancient times, but most strong people underestimated the horror of the Thunder Tribulation and eventually killed themselves. If Lin Sun dared to do so, Wu Hengtian absolutely wouldn't mind adding oil to the fire and interfering with it, so that Lin Sun would be completely killed by the Thunder Tribulation. In the distant sky, Lin Sun stood in the void. His expression was neither sad nor happy, like an ancient well without ripples, as if he was unaware of all this. This tribulation of breaking the realm was originally within his control, and it was one of the reasons why he came to the branch of Golden Crow. Fourth update, please ask for monthly votes from the children. Chapter 1718. The Thunder Tribulation became more and more terrifying. The vast sky had already turned dark, as if it had fallen into the eternal night. The oppressive aura of the tribulation made many cultivators feel like their minds were about to collapse. If possible, Wu Hengtian and all the other Golden Crow powerhouses, of course, hoped that this peerless tribulation would kill Lin Sun in one fell swoop. At this moment, Lin Sun suddenly moved. Everyone who was paying attention to this scene couldn't help but be stunned. The Thunder Tribulation hadn't descended yet, but Lin Sun moved first. What was he going to do? Swish! Lin Sun suddenly stretched his body and looked up at the sky. His black hair fluttered, and a great abyss appeared in his tall figure, devouring the sky. At this moment everyone was stunned. Was he going to devour this peerless tribulation? Wu Hengtian couldn't help but gasp. After living for so many years, this was the first time he saw such a bold and even crazy young man. This was a peerless tribulation that had never been recorded in the ancient books. It was unprecedented and terrifying to the point that even a great saint like him was terrified. But Lin soon actually regarded this thunder tribulation as his prey, and he wanted to devour it. This, Xiaohao, Ruowu, Yu Jianming, Mi Hengzhen and the others were also dumbfounded. Wasn't Lin Sun too cruel? This was no different from throwing his life away. As for the powerhouses of the Golden Crow clan, a thought emerged in their minds at the same time. Was this guy crazy? Boom! In the sky, the tribulation clouds surged, and the tribulation thunder surged, emitting a supreme aura of order, as if it was infuriated. But at this moment, in Lin Sun's eyes, this vast and incomparable thunder tribulation was nothing more than this. And in his mind, the profound meaning of big surged like a tide. Great saint, big and immeasurable, the beauty of heaven and earth is unspoken, the great Tao in the heart is immeasurable. This big can accommodate all rivers into the sea, can accommodate all things. The great saint realm is comprehending size at will, I am immeasurable. The heart is bigger than the sky, and the strength can surpass the sky, cover the sky, look down on all the heavens. Is the great wall of Imperial Pass smaller? No, it is you who have become big. 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 Expand. Sir Shern's deafening voice seemed to still be lingering by his ears. The scenes he saw in Imperial Pass seemed to have appeared before his eyes one after another. In Lin Sun's eyes, the vast and peerless thunder tribulation that covered the sky seemed so small. Did the lightning tribulation become smaller? No. This was because Lin Sun had comprehended the essence of nature. At the moment of passing the tribulation, his state of mind, strength, experience, and cultivation all changed accordingly. To put it simply, he had become bigger. Boom, the great abyss anomaly swallowed up the heavens, and in that instant, it seemed to have become limitless. Then, this great catastrophe was completely engulfed by Lin Sun's power of the abyss before it came, covering the sky and covering the sun, devouring the great calamity. All the experts who witnessed such a shocking scene were dumbfounded. He actually, really swallowed it? Rumble. The abyss revolved and produced terrifying rumbling sounds. Obviously, this was a tribulation that represented the heavenly Tao, and it was unwilling to be resolved in such a shocking manner. It was struggling to kill Lin Sun, the heretic. Instead of retreating, Lin Sun suddenly stepped up into the air and shouted. His figure seemed to have become infinitely tall in an instant, with matchless divine courage and boundless disdain. The abyss that swallowed the tribulation was instantly absorbed into Lin Sun's body. It gave people the feeling that Lin Sun had opened his mouth and swallowed a peerless tribulation that belonged to the great saint realm. It was shocking. If such a scene was spread out, it would probably drive all the practitioners in the ancient desolation territory crazy. After all, it was too shocking. In the sky, Lin Sun's body was shining with incomparable brilliance. Every inch of his pores was flowing with brilliant Taoist light, and bursts of surging thunder came out of his body and spread in all directions. There was no doubt that the terrible power of this thunder tribulation was colliding in his body, and it hadn't been completely refined. This made Old Toad, Alu, and the others tense up. They had never heard of such an incredible thing as swallowing a peerless tribulation and absorbing it into his own body. But they were very clear that once Lin Sun was a little careless and let this tribulation explode in his body, there was absolutely no chance for him to survive. Far away, Wu Hengzhen's eyes flickered with killing intent, as if he was about to make a move. This was undoubtedly an excellent opportunity. However, he gave up in the end. It was very simple. Once Lin Sun died, the power of the tribulation in his body would suddenly disperse. Once he was affected, the consequences would be so serious that Wu Hengzhen couldn't bear it. Little bastard, if you can't hold on, just give up. You want to swallow the tribulation and refine it? I've never seen a person like you who seeks death. Wu Hengtian sneered and shouted, using his voice to interfere with Lin Sun. So what if you're the number one in the 9 regions battlefield? In front of my Golden Crow bloodline, you'll inevitably be struck by lightning and die a horrible death. Someone sneered. Lin Sun, I heard that you have a lot of female confidants. When you die, we'll help you take care of those poor women, ha ha ha. Someone's words were insidious and obscene. For a moment, all kinds of voices resounded, and their purpose was the same. They wanted to disturb Lin Sun's state of mind, distract his experience, and make him die tragically in the tribulation. None of these old bastards and little bastards are good things. Old Toad swore angrily. Xiaohao, Ruowu, and the others also revealed a cold expression. This method was really too despicable and shameless. Boom. Suddenly, a dazzling tribulation thunder flew out from Lin Sun's body in the sky. It evolved into a sharp axe and descended at an incredible speed. A strong practitioner of the Golden Crow bloodline couldn't dodge in time and was directly killed. His body was blown to pieces and his soul scattered. This person was the guy who had just spoken in an insidious and obscene manner. This sudden scene caused everyone to be shocked. Looking at the sky again, Lin Sun's sleeves fluttered in the wind. His body was as clear and pure as colored glass. He stood there casually, but he gave people a feeling of boundless greatness. He was as lofty as a mountain leading to the sky, and as vast as a boundless ocean. He was obviously completely different from before. No matter if it was his aura, or aura, all of them had a type of boundless majesty to him. This was the breath of the great sage. Moreover, it was the unique charm of the great sage. His every move was like an invisible elephant, which was incomparable to the great sage. Did he succeed in passing the tribulation? Wu Hengtian's eyeballs almost fell out, and he almost jumped up. How could this be possible? Such an earth-shattering and earth-shattering calamity was swallowed and refined in one gulp just like that? Countless people in the surroundings were shocked by this scene. Kill! Wu Hengtian reacted the fastest, and he acted almost immediately. A strong practitioner who had just passed the tribulation was also the weakest time. If Lin Sun recovered, there were bound to be a lot of variables. He moved in the void with the spear in his hand, and his means were unparalleled. Lin Sun showed a touch of sarcasm. He waved his sleeve. Boom! The power of the tribulation that had been swallowed by him suddenly rushed out like a flood, turning into palaces, plants, mountains, and rivers. Lightning flashed, dazzling. Wu Hengtian's face changed abruptly. This guy obviously didn't refine the power of the tribulation, but used it at this moment. In a deafening roar, Wu Hengtian, who couldn't dodge in time, was struck by the tribulation thunder. His body trembled, and his flesh was charred, emitting wisps of green smoke. Ha ha, roasting the great sage Golden Crow. I like it. Alu laughed. You're courting death. Wu Hengtian was furious. His spear transformed into millions of golden threads of flame, each of which was hazy, but emitted a terrifying aura of incineration. I was just using you as a whetstone to practice my skills. Now I'll send you on your way. Lin Sun didn't retreat, but advanced. He took a step forward, and the abyss emerged, evolving into layers of tribulation thunder, and spread out in an overwhelming manner. In an instant, the tribulation thunder rolled in the sky, as if it had returned to the beginning of the tribulation. However, the power of the tribulation thunder was completely controlled by Lin Sun, making its power extremely terrifying. Boom! 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 Under the bombardment of the tribulation thunder, Wu Hengtian soon couldn't hold on any longer. His body was cracked, dripping with blood, and his bones could be seen. He roared angrily and attacked crazily. But in the end, it was all in vain. Even if he was at the peak of the great sage realm, how could he withstand the power of such a peerless tribulation? It should be known that this tribulation was prepared for Lin Sun, and it was far from ordinary. It involved the forbidden road of peerless Tao, and the power of the tribulation was beyond imagination. Not to mention Wu Hengzhen, even if another peerless great sage was here, it would be difficult for him to withstand the power of the Way of Heaven. Finally, Wu Hengzhen, who sensed the fatal threat, wanted to escape without hesitation. This battle was too depressing. His opponent was no longer Lin Sun, but a peerless tribulation. How could he defeat it? Die. But just as he was about to escape, Lin Sun came through the void, and a big abyss, like a curtain covering the sky, enveloped Wu Hengzhen. No! Wu Hengzhen screamed in shock and anger, but with a bang, his whole body was crushed into powder by the tribulation thunder and swallowed in the big abyss. His body and soul were both destroyed. An old monster who was about to set foot on the Saint King realm, the most powerful person in the Great Sage realm with a high reputation in the Golden Crow clan. He was killed just like that. He was unable to struggle even at the moment of death. For a moment, the world was dead silent and everyone was shocked. Wu Hengtian's hands and feet were cold, and his eyes were full of disbelief. The other Golden Crow clan strongmen were also horrified, and almost all of them were scared out of their wits. Probably no one had expected that even a figure like Wu Hengzhen would end up in ashes in the end. Cruel, Big Brother is too cruel. I suspect that he had planned to do this a long time ago. Otherwise, how could he so skillfully play with a peerless tribulation in the palm of his hand? Old Toad clicked his tongue. Everyone else agreed. Those who had fought side by side with Lin Sun in the Nine Regions battlefield knew that this guy never fought a battle without preparation. The death of Wu Hengzhen in front of them was the best proof. However, when they thought that Lin Sun would kill the enemy in such an incredible way, they couldn't help but feel dazzled and confused. At this point, after Wu Henghai, Wu Hengzhen was also killed, and Lin Sun was only one battle away from rescuing the spirit of the insignificant spiritual Bao, Tian Ke. The 5th chapter is here. Swallowing Heaven's Retribution, isn't this awesome? At least I haven't seen this in other novels. Chapter 17:21. The place was deathly silent and the atmosphere was oppressive. The faces of every single Golden Crow expert were covered in a gloomy expression, and they were either furious, shocked, savage, and so on and so forth. In the first battle, Wu Henghai, who was known as the first great saint butcher of the last 800 years, died. He was obliterated by a single finger. In the second battle, Wu Hengzhen, who was regarded as the strongest great saint of the Golden Crow bloodline, also died. He died in a strange killing thunder tribulation. This was like one heavy blow after another, causing everyone, including Wu Zhentian, to feel their hearts dripping with blood and anger. How could this be? They had thought that it would be easy to kill a peak true sage if they sent out a great sage. Who would have thought that there would be so many accidents? At this time, Lin Sun stood in the void, and his figure was flowing with the unique fluctuation that belonged to the great saint realm, which was vast and boundless. Just by looking at his appearance, it was hard to imagine that a peerless calamity was actually lying dormant within his body. This was sufficient to make any cultivator feel fearful. I thought such a battle was unfair. Who would have thought that in the end, Lin Sun would win again and again? What a terrible retribution! Xiao Hao sighed, his words filled with mockery towards the Golden Crow bloodline. Initially, Wu Hengtian was afraid of the powers behind these peak true sages, so he shamelessly suggested this method of battle. But in the end, Lin Sun killed 2 old monsters in a row. One should know that great saint realm experts were not as common as cabbages. This was especially true for powerful figures like Wu Henghai and Wu Hengzhen. Even in the ancient Desolation realm, they were a powerful and decisive deterrent. But now, all of them had died in Lin Sun's hands. For the bloodline of the Golden Crows, it was like going for wool and coming home shorn. It was a heavy blow. Ruo Wu, Mi Hengzhen, and Yi Move couldn't help but laugh. Old man, it's time for the 3rd round. At this time, Lin Sun's indifferent voice broke the silence in the field and made Wu Hengtian's face change unpredictably. Even Wu Hengzhen, who was at the consummate great sage realm, was not a match for him. Could it be that they really had to ask for help from the old antiques at the Saint King realm? Oh no, is this old thing going to ask a saint ruler to take action? Suddenly, the old toad's expression changed. Almost at the same time, the expressions of the others changed slightly as they guessed this possibility. If that was the case, they would be in big trouble. What was a sage king? He grasped a Tao domain and condensed a nomological domain. He was a king among sages and stood above all sages. An eminent saint stage powerhouse was nothing in front of a saint king. The disparity was too great, like the difference between clouds and mud. Everyone knew that the death of Wu Hengzhen meant that almost no one in the great sage realm could be Lin Sun's opponent. In order to win the third round, the Golden Crow clan only had one choice: invite the sage king out. If that was the case, even if Lin Sun had stepped into the great sage realm, even if there was a peerless thunder retribution dormant in his body, it was impossible for him to fight against a holy king who had mastered the realm of Tao. This was common knowledge. Sure enough, in the next moment, Wu Hengtian suddenly gritted his teeth and said word by word, "Men, invite Ancestor Wu Yizi over." As soon as he finished speaking, a long sigh sounded out. "I've already arrived. However, I was a step too late in the end. I wasn't able to save Hengzhen." An old man with snow-white hair, a skinny figure, and deep eyes quietly appeared out of thin air. He was dressed in a black robe and looked old, but as soon as he appeared, he had a kind of dominating power. He was like a king who controlled the universe and held the sun and moon in his mouth. "Greetings, Ancestor." All the Golden Crow clan powerhouses, including Wu Hengtian, bowed their heads respectfully. Wu Yizi was one of the pillars of the Sunset Tang Valley, a sage king who had lived for countless years. In a situation where all the quasi-emperors in the world were stationed on the front line, the existence of a sage king could be called the strongest in the ancient desolation domain. If an ancient orthodoxy had such a strong person, it wouldn't be threatened by any other forces at all. The hearts of Old Toad, Alu, and the others all sank. The worst had inevitably happened. A sage king was enough to look down on any existence of the saint realm. In the sky, Lin Sun's eyes became more and more profound. He had already expected this, so he didn't panic. Moreover, when he was at the Great Wall of the Imperial Pass, he had seen many great figures in the quasi-emperor realm. As for the Sage King, it was even more common. However, although he had seen them before, if he really fought them, Lin Sun still felt that it would be extremely troublesome and the pressure would be great. He had just reached the peak of the Great Saint realm and hadn't completely stabilized his realm, so he hadn't truly mastered the power of this realm. The only thing he could rely on was perhaps the peerless thunder tribulation in his body. But for the Sage King, this kind of tribulation that only targeted the peak of the Great Saint realm was destined to not have much of a deterrent. It's time for this farce to end. Wu Yizi sighed softly. His figure suddenly appeared high up in the sky, like a sage king descending to the world. The heavens and earth suddenly became deathly silent, and a formless pressure suddenly spread out. Everyone present only had one feeling: a king descending to the world. Some of the weaker Golden Crow clan powerhouses had the urge to kneel down and worship, and bow their heads in submission. This was the power of a sage king. Not to mention in the eyes of ordinary people, even for the cultivators of the lower 5 realms and life and death kings, sage kings were no different from the legendary gods. And for the old toad, Alu, Xiaohao, and the others, Wu Yizi's power was equally terrifying, causing their bodies to stiffen and their hair to stand on end. This was the absolute suppression of a cultivation realm. At this moment, Lin Sun attacked without hesitation. The phenomenon of a huge abyss appeared, and suddenly, an overwhelming thunder tribulation surged out. It flowed out in a dense manner, just like the Milky Way falling from the 9 heavens. Rumble. The thunder tribulation surged, and the aura of destruction was astonishing. Wu Yizi's expression was dull, and he stood there motionlessly, but there was a golden divine flame domain suddenly spreading out. It gave people the feeling that in this world, a small world derived from the golden divine flame had opened up, and it contained the supreme mysteries of space. Tao Domain. This was a supreme technique of the great Tao that only sage kings could control. In the twinkling of an eye, the endless thunder tribulation was imprisoned in the Tao domain derived from the golden divine flame, and then collapsed and disappeared. Wu Yizi looked indifferent, and his figure remained motionless from beginning to end. But he was really like a supreme ruler, unshakable and despairing. Lin Sun's black eyes suddenly narrowed, and he finally realized that the power controlled by the Sage King was beyond the scope of his understanding, and it was not something that he could shake at present. Good! Wu Hengtian and other strong practitioners of the Golden Crow branch were extremely excited. Old Toad, Alu, and the others were chilled. Wu Yizi was too powerful, and the power of his Tao domain was too terrifying. Young man, is that all you have? Wu Yizi said indifferently with a trace of disdain. But at the same time, Lin Sun suddenly smiled coldly, and the insignificant bow appeared in his hand. The bow was made of white bones, and a scarlet bowstring, as if soaked in blood, was suddenly pulled to the full. Buzz. The wind and thunder surged, and the terrible and fierce aura spread from the bow, reflecting the grand sun collapsing, golden crow crying blood, gods and demons wailing, and other terrible visions. The nearby void collapsed at this time, and the dark and dull blue arrow had been put on the insignificant bow, and the arrow emitted a frightening cold luster. Insignificant bow. Blue arrow. In a flash, Wu Yizi's eyelids twitched violently. He could no longer keep calm, and his face changed greatly. As a member of the Golden Crow branch, how could he not recognize the insignificant bow? The owner of this bow was the sworn enemy of the Dark Crow Emperor, and the spirit of this bow was still suppressed in the Sunset Tang Valley. The blue arrow was one of the 9 divine arrows of the ancient Yi tribe, which had killed countless strong practitioners of the Golden Crow tribe in the past years. Go to hell! Wu Yizi was furious. Boom! He took a step forward, and the world shook. A breath of the Tao domain spread and evolved into a golden world of divine flame, covering Lin Sun in the distance. If Lin Sun was trapped in it, he was doomed to be slaughtered at will, because in the Tao domain, the King of Saints was the supreme ruler, with power over life and death. Bang! At the same time, Lin Sun shot an arrow. But this arrow seemed to be able to run through the ages and break all the fetters. The fierce and unparalleled sharpness made the world resound with an ear-piercing scream. It was too sharp, overbearing, and fierce. In the blink of an eye, it tore a hole in the golden flame domain, as if it was unstoppable. Boom! Wu Yizi was caught off guard and was pierced in the shoulder by the arrow. His blood splashed, his shoulder bone exploded, and his body was shaken and staggered back. There was silence in the field, and everyone was dumbfounded. It was just the beginning of the confrontation, but Wu Yizi, the King of Saints, was injured by an arrow? This is not your power. Above the void, Wu Yizi's face was livid, and he seemed to realize something. Lin Sun looked cold, and he drew the bow again without hesitation. Bang! The Emoli arrow whistled out, and its fierceness was even stronger, making the world chaotic, and the sound of wind and thunder like the roar of demons resounded. Wu Yizi shouted, and his Tao domain emerged, but it was penetrated like a piece of paper in an instant. His face changed dramatically, and an obscure armor appeared in front of him. Bang! In the next moment, this armor that was refined from blazed divine stone was fiercely pierced open, and it exploded into pieces that shot towards the surroundings. Wu Yizi coughed up blood, and his old face turned pale. Although he blocked the arrow, he was still injured. It turns out to be you, you evil creature! Wu Yizi's eyes almost popped out, and he roared. a young man who had just become a great sage at the peak. Even if he had insignificant bow and blue sky arrow, couldn't hurt him, unless someone was helping him in the dark. And Wu Yizi thought of a person in an instant, the evil creature who had been suppressed under the Fusang divine tree for countless years. Everyone in the field was restless because of this shocking change. Old Toad, Alu, Xiaohao, and Mi Hengzhen all looked at each other. They had already guessed that Lin Sun must have come prepared since he dared to come to Sunset Tang Valley. However, when they really saw this scene, they still couldn't help but be amazed. Wu Yizi, the King of Saints, had already taken part in the third battle. How terrible it was! But as soon as the confrontation began, he suffered a heavy setback, which was undoubtedly incredible. Hearing Wu Yizi's words, Wu Hengtian and other Golden Crow strongmen also seemed to realize something, and their faces changed dramatically. Damn it! Could it be that the evil creature had already escaped? Chapter 1722. Sunset Tang Valley. In the dark prison beneath the propping mulberry tree, a voice roared with laughter, and it revealed indescribable delight and excitement. My body is finally back. Ha ha ha, I'm going to pay back all the suffering I've suffered for thousands of years. He roared like a madman. The entire dark prison shook violently. Streams of energy formed from the restrictive laws appeared and fiercely lashed at his body. However, the figure seemed to be unaware of it and continued to laugh wildly for a long time. Bang! Outside the Sunset Tang Valley, just as the Golden Crow powerhouses were shocked, Lin Sun pulled the insignificant's bow and shot an arrow without hesitation. The void was torn like silk, and the monstrous chi was all gathered in the arrow, blasting at Wu Yizi. With a bang, blood rained down. Wu Yizi was injured again and screamed in pain. It was not that he didn't want to dodge, nor did he not resist, but he couldn't dodge at all with the power of a Saint King. He couldn't get rid of the locking power of the insignificant's bow. The most terrible thing was that even if he tried his best to resist, he couldn't. This made Wu Yizi angry. He roared, "Go and see if there's any change in the prison." Immediately, someone hurried back to the Sunset Tang Valley. Bang! The deafening sound of the bowstring was heard again. Wu Yizi was so angry that his face darkened. If it weren't for the help of that bastard, how could he let this little thing be so arrogant? But he had to face it head-on because he couldn't dodge at all. Boom! In the terrible sound of the collision, Wu Yizi staggered, and a bowl-sized bloody hole appeared in his thigh, which made him scream in pain. "Little thing, I'll torture you to death later," Wu Yizi roared. He was a mighty saint ruler, yet he had been injured repeatedly before he could even show his might. He could not even keep his face. He was so ashamed that he wanted to go crazy. Bang! Lin Sun didn't talk nonsense from beginning to end. He drew the bow again and saw Wu Yizi as his prey. However, even Lin Sun had to admit that the Saint King was terrible. If it were great saints like Wu Henghai and Wu Hengzhen, they would have been killed in the first place. Although Wu Yizi looked embarrassed and injured, his foundation was not hurt. Rumble! In an instant, the divine arrows in the sky were like rainbows, tearing through the void. They were ferocious and overflowing. Wu Yizi was injured again, and he roared loudly. Old Toad and the others couldn't help but be flabbergasted. That was a Saint King. Yet, he was actually beaten to such a sorry state. This was simply ridiculous. As for Wu Hengtian and the rest, their faces were extremely ugly and dark. The insignificant bow was indeed terrifying, but without the help of the evil creature in secret, how could the boy achieve this with his strength? Patriarch, the two old ancestors, Wu Fengzi and Wu Lingzi, have already gone to the Fusang Divine Tree to personally suppress that evil beast. Someone hurriedly returned and transmitted a message to Wu Hengtian. All right. Wu Hengtian's eyes lit up. There were 3 King Sage Realm experts in the Sunset Tang Valley. They were Wu Yizi, Wu Fengzi, and Wu Lingzi. Normally, the 3 ancestors would live in seclusion, but there was no doubt that as long as they were around, the Sunset Tang Valley would be safe. Just like that moment. Old ancestor, the outcome has been determined. Wu Hengtian let out a long roar and told the news to Wu Yazi. He didn't mind being heard by others present at all, and his voice was full of excitement. Wu Yazi's spirit was also refreshed, and then his eyes suddenly became extremely cold. He locked on Lin Sun, and his killing intent surged in his heart. Since he stepped into the King Sage realm, he had never suffered such a great shame and humiliation. Under the watchful eyes of so many people, he was beaten to such a sorry state by a junior. How could he establish himself in the ancient desolation domain in the future? Little bastard, you're not far from death. Wu Yazi's voice was cold. But Lin Sun suddenly smiled and said indifferently, Old bastard, you're going to die. Buzz. Before his voice died away, a strange and obscure wave spread out, making everything in the world suddenly fall into stillness. Innate supernatural power, forbidden death. At this moment, Wu Yazi's figure and expression seemed to be still, showing a strange posture. It was also at this moment that the blue sky arrow shot out from the insignificant bow, swept out, like a ray of light in a still picture. Boom! An earth-shattering sound rang out. When people came to their senses from that strange moment, they saw a completely unimaginable bloody picture. A divine arrow pierced through Wu Yazi's chest and made a bloody hole in his heart. The blood splashed out like a waterfall that broke the dam. Immediately, Wu Yazi let out a furious roar, and his face was full of confusion and disbelief. It seemed that even he didn't expect that there would be an arrow piercing through his body in an instant. This was not something that could be explained by the profound meaning of space. Because the speed of teleportation couldn't be so fast that he, a king sage, didn't even notice it and react at all. But how on earth did this arrow appear? Wu Yazi couldn't figure it out. He had no time to think about it. This blow directly smashed his heart into pieces, and his divine soul suffered a destructive blow. Look, you're dead first. When Lin Sun spoke, another divine arrow had burst out. It was still so fierce and terrible. Wu Yazi's face changed greatly, but he was unable to avoid it. He only let out a dull and frightened roar from his lips, and his body directly exploded in the void. Boom! The void there was in chaos, drowned by the terrifying torrent of power. Heaven and earth shook, and the sun and moon lost their light. A king sage, a supreme old monster in the ancient desolation realm, had fallen at this moment. Everyone in the field was dumbfounded. Wu Hengtian trembled all over and cried out involuntarily, Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. The other Golden Crow powerhouses were also shocked and felt a chill all over their bodies. Wu Yazi was the pillar of Sunset Tang Valley, but now he suddenly collapsed in front of them. Old Toad, Alu, and the others also felt dizzy and incredulous. Everything that had happened just now had happened too quickly, so quickly that even they were almost unable to see what method Lin Sun had used to kill a Saint King so cleanly and cleanly. The world was turbulent, the sky was stained with blood, and there was a torrential rain of blood. There were bursts of mournful Dao sounds resounding. Lin Sun put away the insignificant bow and looked down at Wu Hengtian in the distance from the void. He said, I've won all 3 battles. Isn't it time for you to fulfill your promise? His voice drifted between heaven and earth. Wu Hengtian's eyes were red and his face was livid. He gritted his teeth and said, You despicable and shameless little bastard, you used the power of that bastard to kill the Golden Crow ancestor and take that bastard away? Wishful thinking. He was extremely angry. First, Wu Henghai and Wu Hengzhen were killed, and now even Wu Yazi was dead. This was a huge blow to him. We are witnesses. This battle was proposed by you, old bastard, and now you're going back on your word. Can't you afford to lose? Old Toad shouted. If today's news gets out, how will your Golden Crow ancestor have the face to stand in the ancient desolation realm? Don't you think it's shameless? Alu also said angrily. Xiaohao, Ruowu, Mi Hengzhen, Yi Mo and the others also showed cold faces. Wu Hengtian was the leader of a clan, but he did such a thing. He was completely shameless. Wu Hengtian's eyes were red and his face was livid. He said word by word, "Don't worry, no one will spread today's news. You little bastards all have to die. If I don't kill you, my golden crow ancestor will not be able to stand in the ancient desolation realm today." After suffering such a heavy blow, he had completely thrown caution to the wind. He didn't care about anything else. "I knew it would be like this." Lin Sun showed a touch of mockery. His silhouette flashed as a giant abyss appeared, blotting out the sky. After that, bolts of terrifying tribulations of thunder came crashing down. Every thunder tribulations turned into different forms. There were sabers, spears, swords, halberds, cauldrons, seals, bronze bells, and even thunder spirits flashed. "There's more!" A golden crow ancestor cried out. This was really unbelievable. It should be known that when Lin Sun killed Wu Hengzhen, he used the peerless thunder tribulations contained in his body. He also used it when he was fighting against Wu Yazi. But when everyone thought it was over, this peerless thunder tribulations appeared again. Ordinary great saints' tribulations are divided into 4 major stages and 9 minor stages. They are called 4-9 divine tribulations. Mine is different from theirs, Lin Sun said indifferently in the sky. Rumble. Thunder tribulations poured down from the abyss, roaring in the world. Soon, some nearby golden crow ancestor, who couldn't dodge in time, were directly turned into ashes in the blazing lightning arcs. Even the true Saint Realm powerhouses couldn't resist or struggle, and were killed on the spot. Even the great Saint Realm powerhouses like Wu Hengtian were caught off guard. His expression changed dramatically, and he dodged repeatedly. He didn't dare to touch it at all. After all, Wu Hengzhen, who was at the peak of the Great Saint Realm, was easily killed, let alone them. Most importantly, with Wu Yazi's death, the only power that could suppress Lin Sun also disappeared. In short, Lin Sun was unstoppable outside the Sunset Tang Valley. Rumble! Lin Sun moved and flashed in the sky. As his figure appeared, the power of the thunder tribulations struck down. For a moment, it was as if a peerless great tribulation had reappeared in the world here. The breath of destruction was shocking and terrifying. As for the experts of the Golden Crow clan, they suffered heavy casualties in an instant. Most of them didn't even have the time to flee before their souls perished. In the distance, Old Toad, Alu, Xiaohao, and the others were speechless. They had originally planned to help. But now they didn't even have the chance to intervene. They didn't dare to approach the battlefield. If they were touched by the power of the thunder tribulations, the consequences would be so severe that even they couldn't bear it. He could only watch helplessly as this unimaginable massacre unfolded. "Let's go to the Sunset Tang Valley. Quick!" Wu Hengtian roared. His voice shook the sky, and he led the remaining old monsters to flee to the Sunset Tang Valley like a madman. Rumble! Lin Sun chased after them without any hesitation. "Let's go too." Old Toad, Alu, and the others also took action. Wu Hengtian had already broken his promise. At this moment, everyone knew that the operation to attack the Golden Crow clan had finally begun in its true form. Chapter 1724. Fixed a bug. Tian Ke is the name of the owner of the insignificant spiritual bow. This time, the protagonist came to save the insignificant spiritual bow. Sunset Tang Valley. It seemed to be a valley, but in fact it was like a small world. In this world, the grass and trees were all golden, the mountains and rivers were on fire, and lava was spurting out from the earth. Rows upon rows of ancient golden buildings floated in the air. Golden crows were flapping their huge wings as they soared into the sky. This was the lair of the golden crows, which had existed since ancient times and was terrifyingly powerful. But on this day, a great chaos had erupted. Rumble! Wave after wave of deafening rumbling resounded out, and it caused this entire small world to tremble while numerous Golden Crow experts were alarmed. What happened? Let's go and have a look. Exclamations came from all directions. Countless silhouettes darted out from different areas. Most of them were Gold Crow children, servants, and maids. Gosh! It's a heavenly tribulation. How is that possible? Soon, many powerful Golden Crows saw a great tribulation pouring down from the entrance of the Sunset Tang Valley like a waterfall. Wherever it passed, the tribulation thunder was as thick as a bucket. It was as magnificent as a dragon and took all kinds of weird forms. Such a world-shocking scene caused everyone to tremble, and they stared their eyes wide open as if they were looking at the arrival of the end of the world. How could this be? Many people were frightened and confused. This was the setting sun Tang Valley, the territory of the Golden Crow tribe. Since when had such a terrifying thing ever happened in the past? Who in the entire ancient desolation realm dared to offend them? No one. Therefore, the Golden Crow cultivators who had been living in the Sunset Tang Valley for generations were in disbelief when they saw such a calamity befalling them. Where's the chief? Where are the elders? Why didn't they stop it? Someone yelled. That's right. How could those old monsters in the clan not notice the arrival of such a vast calamity? Hurry! Open the sacred formation! An expert of the older generation let out a shout. However, even more people were fleeing in panic. It was extremely chaotic, because the tribulation lightning had already swept over like a storm of lightning. Rumble, this was a great sage tribulation for a peerless figure like Lin Sun. It was enough to kill Wu Hengzhen, who was in the great sage realm, let alone others. For a time, as the thunder tribulation moved, countless experts in Sunset Tang Valley were killed and their souls dispersed. All kinds of buildings, mountains, plants, paths, medicinal gardens, all of them were turned into nothingness under the surging and blazing lightning tribulation. Blood-curdling screams, wails, cries for help, panic, and other sounds rang out incessantly. The heavens and the earth shook, and the scene of great destruction and upheaval appeared. At this moment, not to mention ordinary Golden Crow experts, even old fellows that had stepped foot into the Saint Realm were horrified. Where was Wu Hengtian? He was also fleeing, leading the Golden Crow lineage's important figures towards the Forbidden Land where the propping mulberry tree was at full speed. As for anything else, he couldn't be bothered about it at all. Now that Wu Yazi was dead, it was equivalent to the Golden Crow lineage losing a pillar of support. As for the two sage kings, Wu Fengzi and Wu Lingzi, they were in front of the propping mulberry tree, suppressing the beast. Only by escaping there would they have the hope of reversing the situation. Behind them, Lin Sun controlled the thunder tribulation and chased after them. He was like the god of destruction, accompanied by the mighty thunder tribulation along the way, destroying countless Golden Crow experts and living beings. Layers of Sage Tao restrictions appeared, strict and powerful. However, in front of Lin Sun, they were as fragile as paper, directly crushed by the thunder tribulation and annihilated in bursts of explosions. Too powerful. At this moment, Lin Sun carried the power of the heavenly tribulation, like a god fighting on behalf of the heavens. Behind him, Old Toad, Alu, Xiaohao, and the others who were chasing after him couldn't help but feel their blood boil. They were inexplicably shocked. In a trance, it was as if they had returned to the time when they were fighting in the Nine Regions battlefield. Kill! Alu shouted and rushed out with an iron rod, his aura devouring the mountains and rivers. Boom! With a sweep of the rod, some Golden Crows that couldn't escape in time were smashed into meat paste, and the ground cracked and exploded. How can I, Jean Dui, be absent from such a grand event? Old Toad licked his lips. With a swoosh, he moved the void and swallowed the sun and the moon. His combat strength was extremely powerful. Ha ha ha, everyone, it's time for us to take action. We can't let Lin Sun steal the limelight alone. Xiaohao laughed and stepped forward. Then, Ruowu, laughing at the heavens, Yechen, Yu Jiaming, Qi Lingxiao, Yuan Fatian, Little Golden-Winged Rock, and other true saints Zhu Xiu attacked. In the ancient Desolation realm, a true saint could be regarded as a domineering figure, let alone a group of true saints Zhu Xiu who came from a fierce place like the Nine Regions battlefield. For a moment, the setting sun valley was filled with sword qi, whistling sabers, and all kinds of amazing Taoist skills. Treasures were overflowing with light and color. The huge golden small world was filled with smoke, turbulence, and blood. Kill! 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 The killing intent that shook the universe enveloped and drowned the heavens and the earth. At this time, Lin Sun had arrived at the area where the Fusang divine tree was. The mountain was majestic, filled with chaotic qi and a rain of fire. This was an incomparably sacred area, as if it was an eternal pure land. An ancient tree was rooted in the front of the mountain. Its trunk was strong like a horned dragon, and its whole body seemed to be made of gold, burning with raging flames. Every single leaf was like a sun that hung at the top of the tree, and they glowed brilliantly and flowed with blazing essence that flowed like a waterfall. Fusang Divine Tree. It was a divine tree that had been famous in the ancient Desolation realm since ancient times. It was born from the source of the Samadhi true fire, and was known as the four great divine trees along with Kangwu Parasol, Jianmu, and Kunwu tree. Rumor had it that the sun scripture comprehended by the ancestors of the Golden Crow bloodline came from the natural Taoist patterns of the Fusang divine tree. As Lin Sun arrived, the experts of the Golden Crow bloodline appeared, including Wu Hengtian and other old monsters of the Great Saint realm. Apart from them, there were also two king saints. One was a black-skinned man with a devilishly handsome face, and a pair of eyes that were like golden glass. The other was a middle-aged man in a green robe, with a sage-like demeanor. The former was called Wu Fengzi, and the latter was called Wu Lingzi. They had been in the Sunset Tang Valley for countless years, and like Wu Yazi, they were regarded as the pillars of the Golden Crow bloodline. Is this the one? Wu Fengzi opened his mouth, and his voice was as sharp as a sword. It's this little bastard. Wu Hengtian's face was livid, and his eyes were bloodshot. Far away, Lin Sun stopped in the void. At this point, the peerless power of the catastrophe that he had devoured had already been exhausted. But it didn't matter if he didn't have the power of divine punishment. It seems that the strongest in the Sunset Tang Valley today is only the King Saints. Lin Sun glanced at the crowd with a calm expression. Even in the face of the two King Saints and a group of high-level figures of the Golden Crow bloodline, he didn't show any fear. Little bastard, that evil creature has been suppressed and can no longer help you. Don't you understand the current situation? Wu Hengtian gnashed his teeth. Lin Sun did notice this. When he was outside the Sunset Tang Valley, there was a unique echo between the insignificant bow and the spirit of the weapon. It was precisely because of this kind of cooperation that the insignificant spiritual bow burst out with unprecedented ferocity. Wu Yazi was finally killed. However, after killing Wu Yazi, this echo disappeared. It could be inferred that the spirit of the insignificant bow must have encountered trouble. Although Lin Sun knew it clearly, he didn't panic. Instead, he showed a touch of sarcasm. Ridiculous, do you really think that I'm here just to save that senior? After a pause, he looked cold and said, At this time, I might as well say that today, the Sunset Tang Valley will be removed from the ancient Desolation domain. How dare you? With a roar, Wu Fengzi's horrible pressure of the King Saints crushed Lin Sun like a landslide and a tsunami. But to everyone's surprise, Lin Sun stood motionless in the void. The horrible power that was enough to suppress all the great saints disappeared without a trace as soon as it approached Lin Sun. Everyone's eyes narrowed and their faces changed. At this time, with a clear sound, a sword full of strange black mist appeared in Lin Sun's hand. This sword was covered with dark light, which was strange and awe-inspiring, as if there was a gate to hell inside it, which made people shudder. It was the congenital holy weapon taken from Ming Child, a Vichy sword. At the same time, Lin Sun's aura also changed. His figure became illusory, surrounded by wisps of obscure Taoist light. An invisible power made the world fall into a terrible atmosphere. Even the king saints like Wu Fengzi and Wu Lingzi couldn't help but change their faces slightly. What a horrible aura! How could it be possessed by a man who had just stepped into the great saint realm? At this moment, Lin Sun showed a kind of solitary and cold charm. Between his eyebrows, it seemed that he was overlooking the world. However, Lin Sun smiled bitterly in his heart. Because at this moment, he had been controlled by a force released by the mysterious woman, She. According to She, this kind of scene was not worth her personal appearance at all. Then, Lin Sun found that he was controlled by this mysterious force. It was a wonderful feeling. It was as if he had become an outsider and was watching calmly. However, he could clearly sense all the miraculous changes that occurred within his body. It was as if he was possessed by a god. Do it. Sensing the strange changes in Lin Sun's aura, Wu Fengzi and Wu Lingzi looked at each other and attacked without hesitation. They all displayed the power of the Tao field. Whoosh! A Tao field constructed by green flames appeared, covering the sky and earth. This was the green flame Tao field from Wu Fengzi. Buzz! A golden flame-like leaf appeared in the air, and suddenly became bigger. The veins on the leaf were like the law of Tao, crisscrossing like a net, constructing a huge Tao field. Fire Leaf Gold Field. This was Wu Lingzi's supreme means. Chapter 1726. The Tao realm was also known as the Tao realm. It was the supreme power that could only be controlled by the Sage King realm. It was the embodiment of one's cultivation. It looked like a Tao realm that was like a small world. In fact, all living beings trapped in it would lose control of their lives and be taken away by the master of the Tao realm. Under normal circumstances, the Sage King realm would not use such a powerful weapon unless it was absolutely necessary. That was because there were too few opponents in the ancient Desolation realm that could threaten them. At this moment, the two Tao realms from Wu Fengzi and Wu Lingzi overlapped and targeted Lin Sun. That scene was enough to make other Sage Kings tremble in fear. It could also be seen that the change in Lin Sun's aura made the two Sage Kings of the Golden Crow branch fearful. Lin Sun did not dodge. He looked extremely calm and turned a blind eye to it. He only slashed out with the Avicii sword in his hand. Boom! The thick black sword intent soared into the sky. It was extremely dazzling, like a galaxy in the eternal night. There were stars falling in it. In the process, mist spread and hell appeared. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. The magnificent scene was like the beginning of chaos. It was horrifying and desperate. Oh no! Wu Fengzi and Wu Lingzi's hearts tightened. They felt that the power of this sword was unstoppable and difficult to resist. Without hesitation, they dodged. Bang! Bang! The two terrifying powers of the Green Flame Tao realm and the Fire Leaf Gold realm were crushed by the sword. It could be clearly seen that along with the descent of this sword, the sun, moon, and stars fell while all phenomena collapsed, and it revealed a state of absolute suppression. With a rumble, the place where Wu Fengzi and Wu Lingzi were standing was split into two, forming a deep ravine. Whoosh! Suddenly, the Fusang divine tree moved silently. Golden divine flames that looked like divine chains fell down. Only then did the sword Qi vanquish. At this moment, Wu Fengzi and Wu Lingzi broke out in a cold sweat. What a terrifying sword! This was definitely not something that a young man who had just reached the great sage realm could possess. It was too supreme and unimaginable. Wu Hengtian and the other Golden Crow powerhouses widened their eyes. The aura of the great path contained in this sword made their Taoist hearts feel like they were about to collapse. Previously, with the help of the insignificance Bao, he had the opportunity to kill Wu Yazi. But now, that vile creature has been suppressed once more, so who is helping this kid from the shadows? This shocked them. At this time, Lin Sun raised his head slightly and said in surprise, "The soul of this tree is obviously gone, but it still has such divine power. It deserves to be one of the 4 ancient divine woods." Of course, it was not Lin Sun who spoke. But it was no longer important. "This kid is evil. Let's attack together. Remember, don't leave the propping mulberry trees area of power. Kill." Wu Fengzi and Wu Lingzi spoke at the same time. Their eyes were sinister, their expressions icy cold, and their killing intent covered the heavens and the earth. They'd already realized the strangeness of Lin Sun's strength, and they didn't dare to underestimate him. In the nearby area, all kinds of divine lights danced, and a large number of treasures flew up. Everyone, including Wu Hengtian, made their move. Numerous Taoist arts and treasures were all aimed at Lin Sun. With a bang, the world seemed to explode. All kinds of attacks burst out like lava rain, vast and dense. Lin Sun didn't dodge. Only his figure glowed, and the obscure power wave evolved into a round divine halo, covering his whole body as if invincible. As he shook his wrist, the Avicii sword hummed and spread out thousands of sword shadows, flowing with the black brilliance of the eternal night, densely packed and clanging. Then, they swept out together. The void was easily pierced, riddled with holes. The sword marks were incomparably sharp and all-pervasive. On the spot, more than 10 people were pierced and screamed. No. The sword shadows were extremely sharp, penetrating those people's throats, eyebrows, skulls, hearts, and abdomens, bringing out strings of scarlet blood. When some sword chi cut down, those people's bodies were directly wiped out, and they died suddenly. This scene made people's hearts tremble and souls tremble. It was too terrible. "Fire spirit covers the world," Wu Fengzi shouted, and a golden flame light screen rose in front of the Fusang divine tree, enveloping the front and turning into a huge barrier. It was like a golden moat, and there were divine chains of rules flowing on it. Bang! 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 The sword shadows were finally blocked. Just by counting the number of people, a single sword had actually killed 3 great sages and 5 true sages. They had suffered heavy losses, causing them to go crazy with anger. Rise! Purple light flowed, incomparably brilliant. Wu Fengzi took out a purple beast skin, which turned into a magnificent purple saber in the void. The saber was inscribed with dense ancient totems, and wisps of the aura of a quasi-emperor filled the air. It was extremely shocking. Without a doubt, this was a treasure left behind by a quasi-emperor. Swoosh! The purple saber suddenly slashed out, shaking the heavens and the earth, and purple chi shook the sky. But accompanied by the sound of a collision, Lin Sun casually slashed out. The Avicii sword flowed with black light, and like cutting through tofu, the purple saber that was coming at him was suddenly broken, turning into a rain of light. This, Wu Fengzi's expression changed greatly, and everyone else shivered in fear. What terrifying power this kid had, who exactly was helping him in secret? That purple saber was a precious treasure, left behind by a quasi-emperor Golden Crow before heading for the Great Wall of Imperial Pass. Its killing power was astonishing, and it could even kill Saint Kings. But now it was easily shattered. Judging from this, the power Lin Sun possessed now was at least at the level of a quasi-emperor. Kill! Wu Fengzi, Wu Lingzi, and the others didn't dare to leave the vicinity of the Fusang divine tree. They all attacked with full force, making the world shake. At the same time, ancient restrictive power was activated one after another, uprooting from the ground. Symbols flickered and Tao patterns swirled. They already had nowhere to retreat to. If they couldn't even protect the Fusang divine tree, then Sunset Tang Valley was no different from existing in name only. Therefore, they all began to fight with their lives on the line. Still too weak. Lin Sun walked up, casually holding the Avicii sword. His expression was aloof, colder than snow. As he walked, sword chi weaved, shooting out like bulls, continuously hacking down. Boom! Wherever the sword chi passed, Tao techniques shattered and treasures collapsed. It was as if nothing could stop it, sweeping through everything before it. That ancient restrictive power was painstakingly laid down by the ancestors of the Golden Crow bloodline countless years ago. It was enough to stop the attacks of a quasi-emperor. But under Lin Sun's advance, they were destroyed one after another like fragile glass. Rumbling sounds shook the heavens. What? Even my clan's great restrictive power can't stop it? Who exactly is he? Could it be that an emperor is secretly helping him? Wu Fengzi and the others were overwhelmed with shock, completely panicking. Rumble. Finally, the last restrictive formation was also broken. A rain of light poured down like a tide, dyeing this world in dazzling light. In front of the Fusang divine tree, Wu Fengzi and the others felt their vision darken. They were so furious that they almost coughed up blood. The layers of restrictive formations had protected the Golden Crow bloodline for who knew how many years, but now they were all destroyed by someone. Swoosh! Lin Sun brandished his sword and charged straight at the Fusang divine tree. The great battle broke out completely at this moment. Divine splendor filled the sky. The sword of Avicii was like a gate opened to hell, with the power to suppress and kill everything. Lin Sun's consumption was not great because it was all controlled by the power of Shi. But even so, Lin Sun could not help but be shocked. How strong was she? It should be known that this was only a portion of her power. She did not reveal her own strength at all. Whoosh! The Fusang divine tree shook violently, its leaves glowing like the sun. The power of divine flame poured down like a tide, blocking Lin Sun's attack. For a moment, the sword chi roared and destroyed countless golden divine chains and flames, causing the entire Fusang divine tree to shake violently, as if it could not hold on any longer. Lin Sun's disdainful and fierce posture was simply like an invincible sword master. Wu Fengzi and the others were completely panicked, their faces livid with shock and anger. Quick, summon the ancestral decree. We must not let him destroy the Fusang divine tree. Otherwise, our Golden Crow bloodline will be completely finished. Wu Fengzi roared, his expression grim. Wu Hengtian hesitated. The ancestral decree cannot be used unless it is a matter of life and death. Once it is used, it will consume more than half of the Fusang divine tree's power. I'm afraid it will allow that evil creature to escape from prison. Idiot, if we don't fight now, we will be finished when that little bastard comes. Wu Fengzi said angrily. Wu Hengtian gritted his teeth and made a decision. His expression became pious and solemn as he took out an ancient scroll and held it in his hands while chanting a complicated and obscure incantation. Following that, Wu Fengzi, Wu Lingzi, and the other Golden Crow powerhouses also started chanting, their expressions extremely solemn. Whoosh! The sealed scroll opened slowly, and a terrifying aura rushed out. It was as if an emperor had come into the world. The brilliant divine aura exploded like the scorching sun, illuminating the entire area. The scroll was imprinted with words of the emperor's path, as if it was formed by the great Tao. It shone brilliantly and could not be seen clearly. The aura was too terrifying. Wu Fengzi and the others trembled, and even their souls trembled. The pressure from the decree was too supreme, causing their bodies and minds to almost collapse. A decree written with the will of the emperor's path? That's right, an ancient clan, even if they do not have an emperor, should still have the capital to stand tall for thousands of years. This decree might be their greatest reliance. Lin Sun, who was attacking, seemed to have sensed something. He revealed a trace of surprise, but immediately calmed down. He also stopped attacking, and looked into the distance with his hands behind his back, as if it was very interesting. Finally, Wu Hengtian chanted a long and complicated secret language. A decree was completely unfolded and floated in the void. Every word was like a pearl, shining brightly, and a supreme aura of the Emperor's path rushed into the sky. Almost at the same time, the billions of golden divine flames that flowed down from the Fusang divine tree were all absorbed by this decree. Following that, the aura emitted by this decree became more and more terrifying, causing the heaven and earth to fall into a kind of mourning, as if it was bowing its head to an emperor. Seeing this, Wu Fengzi suddenly looked at Lin Sun in the distance. His expression was sinister and cold, and his killing intent was dense. He said word by word, "Little bastard, no matter who is helping you, this time, all of you will die." Chapter 1728. The Sunset Valley was chaotic and turbulent, filled with blood. Old Toad, Alu, Xiaohao, and Ruowu, these top true sages, dealt with the ordinary golden crows as easily as chopping melons and vegetables. The big black bird had long given up on killing the enemies. Like a gust of wind, it plundered the treasures in the Sunset Valley. Looking at its posture, it wanted to dig 3 feet into the ground and take all the treasures. Suddenly, the world trembled. A terrible aura burst out from the area where the Fusang divine tree was, distorting the rules of this world. What kind of power is this? It's like the arrival of the great emperor. It has the aura of destroying the rules of heaven and earth. Damn it! Has the Golden Crows released the power of the emperor? Old Toad and the others were horrified. Their souls seemed to be oppressed by an ancient divine mountain. They only felt that the world was filled with a terrible power, and their minds were showing signs of trembling. Kill! At the same time, Wu Hengtian shouted in front of the Fusang divine tree. In the void, a decree spread out, flowing with misty brilliance, like the beginning of chaos, filled with the true power of the Emperor realm. Boom! A line of Emperor ancient characters swept out from the decree. Each of them seemed to be made of divine gold, shining brightly. They turned into a golden saber and slashed down at Lin Sun. Lin Sun frowned and suddenly swung the sword of Avicii in his hand. It was simple and violent. Clang! The sword of Avicii and the golden saber collided. A rain of light splashed and shook the field. Lin Sun's arm was numb, and his body shook violently and took a few steps back. Humph, it's just a will. I'd like to see how long you can last. Lin Sun snorted. He waved the sword of Avicii without retreating or dodging. Instead, he rushed forward and slashed continuously with the sword of Avicii. Each slash was simple to the extreme. But each sword chi had the power to shake the universe and kill ghosts and gods. Even the sword of Avicii became darker and more dazzling, clanging and shaking the world. Everyone was stunned. Wu Hengtian and the others' eyes almost fell out. That was the decree left by the Dark Crow Emperor, branded with the supreme aura of the Emperor realm, which was enough to kill a quasi-emperor. But now Lin Sun was fighting with it, colliding with the will of the great emperor. This was undoubtedly too incredible. How can an ant like you resist the will of a great emperor? Kill! Wu Hengtian roared. His mind communicated with the decree, and rows of ancient emperor characters appeared, transforming into golden spears, divine swords, great seals, ancient pagodas, all of them rushed to kill Lin Sun. In an instant, the entire area shook, and a terrifying emperor's aura surged. It would not be an exaggeration to say that any saint who dared to approach at this moment would be instantly obliterated. This level of power was too terrifying, and even the nomological energy of this world showed signs of being unable to endure it. In the face of such a bombardment, Lin Sun's reaction was simple. He swung the Avicii sword. A ruthless slash. Every strike was simple to the extreme, but it was also terrifyingly sharp. Dang! 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 Deafening rumbling resounded. Every single collision shook the heads of many old fellows to the point their heads droned, and they saw stars. It was so uncomfortable that they almost coughed up blood. However, what was even more unacceptable or horrifying was that Lin Sun was not wiped out immediately at this moment. Instead, he was shining all over, holding the sword to kill with a proud and aloof posture as if he was invincible. Everyone's scalp went numb. Was he still human? Who would dare to believe that he could even resist the will of a great emperor? In this world, if a quasi-emperor were here, he would probably bow his head in shame and admit his inferiority. Because even a quasi-emperor was destined to be unable to escape the killing of a great emperor's decree. But it just so happened that a peerless great saint like Lin Sun was fighting back, and his posture was strong. He swung the divine sword and slashed violently. His means were rough, but there was another kind of shocking power. Could it be that the one secretly helping this boy is really a great emperor? No. The ancient desolation realm's rule of heaven and earth is simply unable to withstand the power of a great emperor. It is destined that there will not be a great emperor in this world. But what the hell is going on? At this moment, Wu Fengzi, Wu Lingzi, and other king sages all changed their expressions, revealing a look of horror and disbelief. Kill. Wu Hengtian's eyes were about to burst out of their sockets, and they were about to bleed. Buzz. In the sky, the emperor's decree tumbled, and countless emperor's ancient characters emerged like rays of bright light, rumbling and surging, interweaving the emperor's will and law. In a trance, there seemed to be an unusually majestic figure appearing, with cold and deep eyes and a domineering aura, like a supreme ruler. Dark Crow Emperor. At this moment, Wu Fengzi, Wu Lingzi, and other old monsters were so excited that they almost cried. How many years had it been since they had seen the majesty of their ancestor? Now, even if it was only formed by a strand of willpower, it still made them excited. Boom! The shadow of the Dark Crow Emperor pressed out with his palm, and the power that could collapse the heavens and the earth spread out, crushing all of Lin Sun's attacks and slapping him away. He coughed up blood at the corner of his mouth, and almost fell from the void. Good! The old golden crows shouted with excitement. This was the true power of the great emperor's decree, and it was as powerful as a ruler. This is interesting. Lin Sun spoke in the distance with indifferent eyes. He suddenly soared into the sky, and the Avicii sword in his hand suddenly produced a pitch-black prison. It was completely formed by thousands of interwoven sword chi, and it pressed down. Looking from afar, it was like opening the entrance to hell. Boom! The heavens and the earth seemed to collapse, unable to bear the supreme power reflected by this sword, and all of them struck towards the shadow of the Dark Crow Emperor. The sword rain was like a waterfall, and the sword chi was like a prison. The sound shook the heavens like stars exploding. Bang! The shadow of the Dark Crow Emperor swayed, and he was actually unable to do anything to such a purgatory of swords. He shouted coldly, and his illusory body flowed with an immortal aura, and it kept glowing. He punched out, and every punch carried the power to burn the world. Lin Sun swung his sword, and the Avicii sword developed layers of hell. It was sharp, terrifying, and ghastly, and it caused the sky to shake. For a time, the place was in complete chaos, and the scene of destruction filled it. The hearts of everyone present trembled, and their eyes hurt. They couldn't see the scene of the battle at all because the power was too supreme. Rumble! The shadow of the Dark Crow Emperor was swaying, but his emperor's power was still strong, and every strike he struck overturned the world and crushed everything. The huge Sunset Tang Valley was shaking violently. Countless ancient buildings collapsed, and countless mountains and plants turned into powder. This was originally the dwelling place of the Golden Crow clan, a famous sacred and secluded Pure Land in the ancient Desolation realm. But now everywhere was collapsing and destroyed. Lin Sun's expression became colder and colder, and he kept swinging his sword. Because the speed was too fast, the Avicii sword set off countless sword shadows, and the aura it released turned into an immortal hell sword sea. Finally, with a roar, the shadow of the Dark Crow Emperor staggered back, and his body dimmed a lot. Lin Sun didn't stop, and he slashed out continuously. It was like one hell after another appeared in the world, and he wanted to suppress everything. In the battle, the two of them were shaking violently, and they kept clashing. The divine sound that erupted was like the chanting of the gods, and it was terrifying. The shadow of the Dark Crow Emperor became more and more blurry, and its brilliance became dimmer and dimmer, and it seemed to be on the verge of collapse. The lips of Wu Fengzi and the others trembled. How terrifying was this power to be able to fight against the will of the great emperor! Boom! Suddenly, Lin Sun's body emitted an immortal light that illuminated the sky, and his aura became more and more powerful. He suddenly put away the Avicii sword and raised his hand. It was a simple action, but a myriad of divine lights appeared, and it developed into an ancient platform that seemed to suppress the heavens. It was too dazzling, and people couldn't look at it directly. Break! A single word was uttered softly, following which, an endless blazing light rose from the platform and engulfed the dark demon emperor. The sound of collision resounded, and the world seemed to be in chaos at this moment. It fell into chaos, and nothing could be seen or felt. Everyone's mind shook violently, and their vision was blank. They were stimulated by the terrifying aura to the point that their souls almost left their bodies, and they felt as if they had fallen into an abyss. When the smoke dissipated, and the surroundings were silent, the figure of the Dark Crow Emperor had disappeared, and the great Emperor's decree had also disappeared. In the deathly silent atmosphere, Lin Sun's figure stood in the field, and he seemed eternal, cold, aloof, and had a proud demeanor. The great Emperor's decree was broken? Someone was shocked and confused, and he couldn't help but murmur, "No!" Immediately, Wu Fengzi's incomparably shrill cry sounded in the field, and he seemed to have gone mad. How could it be? How could it be? The other old monsters were also on the verge of collapse. They couldn't bear such a blow, and they were all in a mess, as if they were grieving the death of their parents. This great emperor's decree was the biggest trump card of Sunset Tang Valley, and also the strongest power possessed by the Golden Crow bloodline. But now it was completely destroyed. It was like the sky had collapsed. Next, it's your turn. Suddenly, Lin Sun turned his head, looked at the bottom of the Fusang divine tree, and conveyed a thought. As soon as his voice fell, the mysterious and obscure power on Lin Sun's body suddenly disappeared, and the original cold and aloof charm also dissipated. At this moment, Lin Sun finally regained control of his body, but his mind was also in a trance. Although the mysterious woman, she had separated a part of her power to help him fight, Lin Sun clearly felt every detail of the battle. This wonderful experience made him feel the mystery of the battle of emperors in advance in the Great Saint Realm. It was incredible. This was also destined to be a rare and precious experience, which was enough to benefit him on the road of cultivation in the future. Wu Fengzi and others, who were grieving, angry, and panicking, immediately noticed the change in Lin Sun's aura. At first, they were stunned. The power that helped him disappeared? After that, all of them revealed terrifying and ghastly killing intent. The great emperor's decree was gone, but at the same time, the power that Lin Sun relied on also disappeared. This was undoubtedly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. However, before they could take action, the Fusang divine tree suddenly roared, and the ground there suddenly exploded, and a figure rushed out. Ha ha ha, after so many years, I finally see the light of day again. Amidst the wild laughter, a dreadful and monstrous ferocious aura spread out. The figure, like an ancient fierce god, looked up to the sky and laughed, and his voice shook the world, as fierce and crazy as before. Chapter 1730. What? Wu Fengzi and others, who originally wanted to kill Lin Sun, all changed their faces at this moment. That evil beast was out of trouble. With a buzz, their brains almost exploded. As soon as the mysterious force that helped Lin Sun left, the spirit of insignificance Bao broke free, which made Wu Fengzi and others feel like collapsing. Blessings never come in pairs, and misfortunes never come alone. The Fusang divine tree was dim, and its branches and leaves showed a kind of gray color. The previous decree of the great emperor had drained most of its power, so it was impossible to suppress the spirit of insignificance Bao. At this moment, that figure stood in the sky while laughing madly towards the sky, and his ferocious killing intent was simply like a surging tide that covered the heavens and the earth. Looking closely, he was obviously an extremely handsome young man, but his beard and hair showed a kind of gray color. His eyes were like black whirlpools, flowing with frightening murderous light. "Young master, please lend me your bow." When the gray-haired young man looked at Lin Sun, he bowed with a touch of deference. This was a recognition of Lin Sun's identity. In other words, from the moment Lin Sun broke into Sunset Tang Valley and rescued him, he had already recognized this young man. "Take it." Lin Sun threw the insignificant's bow and blue arrow out and caught them in the hands of the gray-haired boy. Buzz. The gray-haired young man pulled the bowstring with his index finger, and his voice was as loud as wind and thunder. His eyes were filled with excitement, absent-mindedness, and joy as he muttered, "I have finally slaughtered my way out of this world. Old Mowu, wash your neck clean and wait. Very soon I will find you for revenge." At the end of his words, he suddenly raised his head and glanced at Wu Fengzi and others. With a cold curve on his lips, he said in a violent tone, "I said that when I get out of trouble, all the sufferings I have suffered since ancient times will be paid back one by one. Now is the time." He suddenly pulled the bowstring, and the blue sky arrow burst out. Boom! This arrow had the power to tear the void and crush mountains and rivers. The fierce spirit was like a substance whistling out with this arrow. Vaguely, the sounds of slaughter resounded throughout the world. Lin Sun's hair stood on end. The power of insignificance bow in the hands of its spirit was completely different. It was unimaginably horrible. "Dodge!" Wu Fengzi roared. However, in the end, he was still a bit too slow. Or rather, it was impossible for him to dodge such an arrow. Bang! A figure exploded, flesh and blood splattering everywhere. It was Wu Lingzi. He was in existence at the Saint King realm, yet he'd been blasted to death by a single arrow, and his shattered body had vanished within the ferocious light of the arrow. Wu Hengtian and the rest were completely overwhelmed with shock. Their entire bodies were covered with terror, and they almost instinctively fled at the first instant. The weapon spirit of the insignificant spiritual bow was too terrifying. When he was suppressed, they could still regard him as an evil creature, whipping and humiliating him. But when the spirit of the insignificant bow was freed, it was completely different. The power he possessed was even beyond the imagination of any of the Gold Crow clan's elders. Trying to escape? Impossible. The gray-haired boy, like a fierce god, shot more than 10 arrows in an instant. Each arrow had the power to penetrate the sky and sink the sun and moon. Puff, puff, puff. For a time, the Gold Crows were pierced through one after another. Their bodies exploded and blood rained everywhere. Both their bodies and souls were destroyed. No matter the old monster of the Great Sage Realm or the True Sage Realm, all those who were targeted by the insignificant spiritual bow could not escape death. The gray-haired boy stood in the void. He was thin and exuded a fierce aura. The ferocious bow composed of many white bones and skeletons made him more extraordinary. Even Lin Sun couldn't help but gasp. He was too strong. An artifact spirit had been imprisoned for countless years and had suffered innumerable amounts of whipping, torture, and suffering. Now that it had escaped, it actually still possessed such monstrous ferocious might. Lin Sun couldn't imagine what kind of amazing power the weapon spirit of the insignificant spiritual bow had at the beginning. At this moment, Wu Lingzi was a Saint King, the supreme existence in the ancient Desolation realm, but he couldn't resist the blow of the gray-haired boy. Bang! 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 The sounds of bowstrings being drawn resounded one after another. The gray-haired youth stood in the clouds with his long hair fluttering in the wind, and his handsome face was filled with an arrogant and ghastly expression. "I swore that sooner or later I would destroy this place and the Gold Crows. If I let you escape today, wouldn't it seem that I didn't keep my word? Ha ha, look at you bastards, you are still as timid as before. Where is your courage when you whipped me? Why is it gone? It's a pity that there are no more quasi-emperors in the Sunset Tang Valley." It's not satisfying to kill you useless old bastards. The voice full of hatred kept ringing, echoing throughout the Sunset Tang Valley. At this moment, the gray-haired boy was like a vengeful god, venting all the anger and hatred he had suffered over the years in his attack. He was chasing and attacking wantonly in the Sunset Tang Valley. In the Sunset Tang Valley, Old Toad, Alu and others had just come to themselves. The collision between Lin Sun and the great emperors will made them feel uncomfortable and shocked even though they were far away. When they finally calmed down a little, they saw the ferocious scene of the gray-haired boy holding the insignificant spiritual bow and killing people. For a moment, they couldn't help being stunned again. Oh my, who is this big shot? Isn't his combat power too fierce? Alu screamed. Who else can it be? It must be the weapon spirit of the bow. According to my elder brother, this guy is extremely amazing. He has been suppressed here for countless years. No matter how hard the gold crows tried, they couldn't kill him. He's so abnormal. Old Toad was amazed. Even an artifact spirit is so terrifying. What kind of astonishing origin does that bow have? The big black bird's eyes were shining, staring at the gray-haired boy and the insignificant spiritual bow greedily. This was the real peerless treasure. The gray-haired boy seemed to be aware of the big black bird's gaze and suddenly looked over. His fierce eyes were like whirlpools, which made the big black bird tremble and quickly withdraw his gaze. Oh, a black crow. It seems that you are not the same species as those old bastards. The gray-haired boy laughed and ignored the big black bird. His figure flashed and chased away. The big black bird looked gloomy and scolded. My origin is enough to scare the great emperor to death. How can a black crow compare with me? Everyone rolled their eyes. Scared the great emperor to death? This damn bird was really arrogant. They didn't stay idle either. They all took action to sweep the Sunset Tang Valley. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, there were no more living Golden Crow clan experts in the vast Sunset Tang Valley. There were only corpses and a mess on the ground. Come on, help me find Crow Nest sapphire water. By the way, plunder as many flame divine stones as you can. The big black bird's excited voice sounded between heaven and earth. The enemies had been almost wiped out, and the Sunset Tang Valley was also trampled. Now it was the time to search for treasures and loot wealth. It should be known that Gold Crow was an ancient clan. It had been living in the Sunset Tang Valley since ancient times. The wealth accumulated by it for countless years was simply unimaginable. Even Old Toad, Alu, and Xiaohao couldn't help but be surprised when they were searching. There were too many treasures, all kinds of rare treasures, magic materials, and spiritual medicines. Among them, there were some wonderful ancient treasures, powerful holy weapons, and some rare ores and books. Lin Sun didn't participate in this feast of dividing treasures. It was not that he was not interested, but that he had more important things to do. Ah, Fusang Divine Tree! God, this must not be an illusion. It's a miracle that such a tree still exists in the world. It's a miracle! A divine tree with a vigorous trunk and lush green leaves cried out in excitement, and its myriad of branches rustled as if they were dancing with joy. It was the divine refinement ancestral tree. Lin Sun had taken this tree away from the secret realm of the Blood Demon world in the 9 regions battlefield and kept it in the Tower of Endless Way. This divine refinement ancestral tree was very special. It had once followed the sky-splitting emperor to cultivate, traveled through the void, and experienced many things. Moreover, it had intelligence and a soul. The divine refinement ancestral source it produced was inconceivably beneficial to Lin Sun in refining his life saint weapon. How about it? Can you take this tree away? Lin Sun asked. The divine refinement ancestral tree said excitedly, Why should I take it away? Wouldn't it be better for me to refine it and fuse it into my body? You can even devour this tree for your own use? Lin Sun couldn't help but be startled. It should be known that even though he controlled the great Tao furnace scripture and the boundless devouring scripture, he didn't dare to say that he could devour this divine tree that had existed since ancient times. However, the divine refinement ancestral tree seemed to be staring at a fat prey. This was very shocking. Of course I can. However, it will take time. At most 1,000 years, no, within 5,000 years, I will definitely be able to refine all the power and Tao patterns contained in this tree. The divine refinement ancestral tree said with certainty. Lin Sun said, I don't have time to wait for you for 5,000 years. The divine refinement ancestral tree was anxious. It gritted its teeth and said, then cut it down. I only want its origin root. No. There was a ripple in the void, and the gray-haired youth teleported and said, the Fusang divine tree was born in the chaos and grew in the source of the Samadhi true fire. Its soul has long been taken away by the Dark Crow Emperor. If it is destroyed, there will be no second Fusang divine tree in this world. His return at this time undoubtedly proved that Wu Lingzi and the other old monsters of the Golden Crow bloodline were probably dead. You don't hate it? Lin Sun was a little surprised. The gray-haired youth had a complicated look in his eyes. This tree was raised by the heavens and has no good or evil. It has just been used and controlled by the Golden Crow bloodline. It is impossible for me to hate it. Lin Sun nodded and understood. Chapter 1731. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. Why? The gray-haired youth said, for the Chaos Origin Tree. The divine refining ancestral tree was immediately displeased. This is just an absurd rumor. The gray-haired youth glanced at the tree that had once followed the sky-splitting emperor and said, if it wasn't for the Chaos Origin Tree, why would you refine the root of the Fusang divine tree? I did it for cultivation. The divine refining ancestral tree retorted. The gray-haired youth's eyes were filled with fierceness. That piercingly cold gaze caused the divine refining ancestral tree to sway as it exclaimed, what do you want to do? The gray-haired youth retracted his gaze and said to Lin Sun, young master, the 4 ancient divine trees, Fusang, Kangwu, Jianmu, and Kunwu, are all born from the origin of chaos. They naturally contain the Tao patterns of the origin of chaos. According to rumor, so long as the soul origin roots of these 4 types of divine trees are gathered and nurtured with the chaotic life soil, 5-colored wondrous earth, clear muddy star soul sand, and primeval chi water, then a sapling of the chaotic quintessence tree would be born. At that time, the seedling can be nurtured in the body, and it will be of incredible help to the cultivation of the Emperor Tao. I once heard Master Tian Ke say that in the battle of the Emperor realm, whoever can control a chaos origin tree will have the foundation to comprehend the law of chaos and control the Tao of chaos. It is far from what other Emperor realm cultivators can compare to. When Lin Sun heard this, his eyes couldn't help but reveal a strange expression as he looked at the divine refining ancestral tree. He clearly remembered that when he took away the divine refining ancestral tree from the secret realm of the blood demon world in the 9 regions battlefield, this guy made many requests. For example, he asked for the chaotic life soil, 5-colored wondrous soil, clear turbid star soul sand, and so on. At that time, he thought that this guy was asking for an exorbitant price and clearly didn't intend to go with him. But now it seemed that this guy clearly had a plan. Being stared at by Lin Sun, the divine refining ancestral tree felt uncomfortable and coughed. Of course I've heard of the Chaos Origin Tree. Back then, I traveled the boundless void with the sky-splitting emperor in order to find the 4 divine trees, Fusang, Kunwu, Jianmu, and Kangwu. Before he finished, Lin Sun interrupted him. I've got it. Now you stay here. He looked at the gray-haired youth and said, since the divine soul of the Fusang divine tree has been taken away by the Dark Crow Great Emperor, doesn't that mean that its origin source is useless? The gray-haired youth shook his head. As long as you possess its origin root, you can nurture another divine soul and turn it into a divine soul origin root. Lin Sun completely understood. When he looked at the towering Fusang divine tree again, His eyes were completely different. This divine tree was actually related to the cultivation of the Emperor Tao. It was a heavenly treasure that even emperors would painstakingly search for. Perhaps this was the golden crow's most precious treasure. Compared to it, the other treasures were obviously much dimmer. Little master, please wait a moment. I will help you collect this tree. As he spoke, the gray-haired young man soared into the sky and suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed. Boom! The fiery red propping mulberry tree towering in the sky suddenly shook violently, as if it was still resisting. However, under the pressure of the gray-haired young man's strength, its body kept shrinking, and finally turned into a palm-sized divine tree that was as clear as fire and carved out of fine jade. It was flowing with chaotic chi and emitted celestial light. It was extremely beautiful. Little master, the power of the Fusang divine tree has been sealed by me. When you find the 5-colored wonderful soil in the future, you can cultivate it in it first. As he spoke, the gray-haired young man handed the palm-sized Fusang divine tree to Lin Sun with both hands. The divine alchemy ancestral tree was drooling at the side, revealing an incomparable desire. However, Lin Sun ignored it and carefully put away the Fusang divine tree. He said, "Many thanks." The gray-haired young man revealed a mouthful of snow-white and neat teeth and said with a bright smile, "Little master, you are the master and I am the servant. It is only right and proper for us to do these things." Generally speaking, the more powerful a creature was, the more humiliated it would be if it wanted to lower its head to someone weaker than it. However, the gray-haired young man seemed to be extremely natural and upright, without a trace of fierceness. Instead, he gave people a clear and warm aura, which was very unusual. Lin Sun thought for a moment and asked, "Wu Fengzi and others, are all dead?" The gray-haired young man nodded, and an imperceptible ominous light flashed in the depths of his eyes. "Although they are dead, the bloodline of Golden Crow is not really extinct. There are still many remnants of their bloodline on the starry ancient path." Dark Crow Emperor? Exactly. By the way, there was a senior named Fei Lan who once mentioned you to me and said that you were best friends. Fei Lan? The gray-haired young man was stunned and a little excited. He is still alive? In this way, he's already found the critical factor to become an emperor? Lin Sun immediately told him that the golden cicada young man took Fei Lan, Zhao Yuanji and others to the starry ancient path. The gray-haired young man smiled brightly. "That's great. Young master, you don't know that Fei Lan is the same as me. His original body is the Chaos Bell of the Great Way. A long time ago, we didn't get to know each other without fighting. Later, after experiencing some things, we can be said to be friends of life and death. Since Fei Lan has mentioned me to young master, he must have a lot of trust in young master." When he looked at Lin Sun, there was a touch of kindness in his eyes. Although he was respectful and submissive, he was not as aloof as before. It was reasonable to think about it. The gray-haired young man had lived for thousands of years. He looked like a strange young man, but in fact, he could be called an old monster at the level of a living fossil. It was obviously not that simple to let such a character like him recognize Lin Sun as his master from the bottom of his heart. Lin Sun could also feel it, but he could see that the attitude of the gray-haired young man towards him had obviously changed. The gray-haired young man said, "Young master, I may have to rest for a period of time to recover. Before that, I have a presumptuous request." Lin Sun said, "Go ahead." The gray-haired young man said, "I need holy treasures, the more the better. Only by absorbing the essence of these treasures can I completely restore the vitality that has been obliterated for thousands of years." Lin Sun agreed without hesitation. What he didn't lack was all kinds of holy treasures, all of which were trophies obtained after years of killing. The gray-haired young man took a deep look at Lin Sun. Without hesitation or thinking, he agreed to Lin Sun's request, which was worthy of Lin Sun's recognition as his master. He said softly, "Little master, there are some things I have to tell you. My previous master's name was Tian Ke, and he was once schemed against by the Crow Demon Emperor, resulting in a blood feud. One day, I will head to the Starry Sky Ancient Path to avenge Master Tian Quebec. This is a big cause and effect. For young Master, once you are implicated, it is very likely to be a great disaster. Before he finished, Lin Sun said with a smile, I know, but do you think that the Dark Crow Emperor will not hate me from now on? The gray-haired young man was stunned and instantly understood. Today, the Sunset Tang Valley was destroyed, and almost all the strong practitioners of the Golden Crow clan living in it were wiped out. Even the Fusang Divine Tree was taken away. If the Dark Crow Emperor knew such a great hatred in the future, how could he let it go? Lin Sun looked calm and continued, Since I chose to save you, I have long known the pros and cons of this matter. So, even if I encounter a great disaster in the future, you and I will fight together. The gray-haired young man was stunned. Lin Sun, as a top true saint, might be regarded as noble in the world, but in the gray-haired young man's eyes, he was not so powerful. But the spirit and demeanor Lin Sun showed at this moment moved the gray-haired young man. Only then did he realize that this young master was far from as simple as he thought. He took a deep breath and said, Young master, I, Wu Kei, will do my best to help you conquer the Tao in the future. Lin Sun nodded with a smile. He thought that the former master was named Tian Ke, and named him Wu Quebec obviously. He had some expectations. He was very curious. Could the spirit of a treasure also become an emperor? Or was there really such an incredible thing in the world? At least, according to the words of Wu Kei, the spirit of the primordial bell, flying mist, was obviously seeking an opportunity to become an emperor. Moreover, Lin Sun had witnessed this incident in the mulberry forest. Next, Wu Kei turned into a wisp of white mist and returned to the insignificant bough. Lin Sun also gave Wu Kei all the holy treasures that he didn't need. Lin Sun was looking forward to how powerful Wu Kei would be when he regained his original fighting power. Big brother. Before long, Old Toad, Alu and others flew over excitedly. However, the big black bird looked depressed because its wings were tightly held by Old Toad and Alu, who were worried that it would run away. Lin Sun was stunned. What's going on? Alu smiled and said, This bird has plundered a lot of good treasures. We are worried that it will swallow them all, so we temporarily control it. Damn it, am I that kind of person? The big black bird cried out with grievance. Old Toad said with a smile, You are not a human, but a bird. It's hard to predict a bird's mind. Lin Sun was speechless. With a snap, Alu slapped the big black bird on the forehead and said, Come on, take out those 2 treasures. The big black bird was so angry that it cried out. But in the end, it couldn't resist the suppression of Old Toad and Alu. It opened its mouth and spat. Whoosh, whoosh. 2 divine arrows appeared in the air. One was snow-white, emitting a vast expanse of silver light. The arrow body was about the thickness of a thumb, and it was engraved with 2 sharp and frightening Taoist runes, Lucky Light. The other was emitting illusory blue light, just like the Lucky Light arrow. But the arrow was engraved with 2 looming Taoist runes, Peace Feather. The 2 magic arrows were suspended in the air, shining brilliantly. Both of them were extremely frightening, causing violent ripples in the nearby void. Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed, bursting with a strange light. Lucky Light and Peace Feather. Chapter 1733. The 9 magic arrows of the E-tribe were called Blue Sky, Netherworld, Moly, Crooked Tooth, Auspicious Light, Peace Rain, Invincible, Soul, and Shang Xie. Blue Sky Arrow was obtained by Lin Sun in the bloodthirsty battlefield. Moly Arrow was obtained from Xing Etian, a descendant of the Thunder Wing clan, when he crossed the Boundary River to Dongxing territory for the first time. Over the years, these 2 magic arrows cooperated with insignificant Bao and helped Lin Sun kill many strong enemies. Even Lin Sun didn't expect that he would get Auspicious Light and Peace Rain again in this Sunset Tang Valley. Moreover, These were a pair of magic arrows that complemented each other. Boy, these are my trophies. If you want them, you should at least take out some treasures to exchange for them, right? The big black bird shouted. Lin Sun smiled and put away the 2 magic arrows unceremoniously. He said, "If it weren't for me, how could you have the chance to plunder the treasures of Golden Crow? Old Toad, Alu, if you can spit out the treasures eaten by this bird, I will give you 20% each." After that, he turned around and left. Old Toad and Alu looked at each other and laughed mischievously. They looked at the big black bird maliciously, and the latter was like a virgin girl about to be raped, its body trembling as it shrieked. Lin Sun ignored it directly and didn't look back. As he walked forward, Xiao Hao, Ruowu, and Yu Jianming were coming from a distance. These friends of Ji Hao's had traveled from all over the world to attack the Golden Crow clan. They would rather offend the Golden Crow clan than fight alongside Ji Hao. How could Lin Sun not be moved? "Thank you very much, everyone. How about having a drink in this Sunset Tang Valley tonight?" Lin Sun said with a smile. "Ha ha, I'm waiting for you to say that. Isn't it great?" Everyone laughed and the atmosphere was warm. Not long after, a banquet was held in the Sunset Tang Valley. Everyone toasted and laughed, talking about the Tao and the affairs of the world, drinking and chatting merrily. It was a happy and harmonious atmosphere. Life should be enjoyed to the fullest. Don't let the wine cup be empty to the moon. That night, Lin Sun was drunk. This banquet was called the Absolute Tao Banquet by the later generations, and it was discussed enthusiastically by all. In the years to come, Sunset Tang Valley that had been reduced to ruins had become a famous historical site in the world, and it attracted countless cultivators to admire it as if it was a pilgrimage. The Golden Crow bloodline was destroyed, and Sunset Tang Valley was reduced to ruins. When the news spread out, the entire ancient Desolation realm was in an uproar. Who would have thought that Lin Sun, the strongest in the 9 regions battlefield, who had been silent for half a year, would once again become the focus of the world? The world was in an uproar. Heavens! Is this true? Not to mention ordinary cultivators, even the ancient forces of the ancient Desolation region couldn't sit still and were shocked. The Golden Crow clan was an ancient clan that had existed for countless years. They resided in Sunset Tang Valley, and could be said to be one of the most colossal beings in the world. But now it was flattened by Lin Sun. Who would believe it? This is impossible. According to the news, he has already become a great sage. But even so, how can he be a match for an ancient clan? There must be a powerful person helping him. Damn it. Doesn't this mean that Lin Sun's current power is enough to threaten the survival of the ancient orthodoxies in the world? The major forces that originally hated Lin Sun were all in a panic. They were shocked by the news and were in a mess. Half a year ago, even though they knew that Lin Sun had become the strongest in the 9 regions battlefield, these forces that hated Lin Sun were not afraid of him. At most, they were afraid of Lin Sun's rapid growth. But now, with the destruction of the Golden Crow bloodline, they found a shocking and cruel reality. The existence of Lin Sun was enough to threaten the survival of their orthodoxies and trample them under his feet. This was terrible. Demon God Lin is really worthy of his name. After this battle, which ancient orthodoxy in the world dares to look down on him? There were also countless practitioners who sighed with emotion and expressed their respect and admiration for Lin Sun. Over the years, rumors about Lin Sun emerged every once in a while, so that the strong in the world almost watched how Lin Sun rose step by step in the ancient Desolation realm. They also knew how great the impact of the destruction of the Golden Crow bloodline would be. It was no exaggeration to say that those forces that were once enemies of Lin Sun would be restless. All the orthodoxies in the world would inevitably change their attitude towards Lin Sun. If any orthodoxy dared to disrespect Lin Sun again, they would have to weigh the consequences first. The impact of this matter was really too great. For example, the Golden Crow bloodline, which represented the most powerful forces in the ancient Desolation realm, was destroyed by Lin Sun, a young man. Who could sit still? In the future, in the ancient desolation realm, who can suppress this young man? Who dares to offend and provoke him? The figures of the saint realm in the ancient orthodoxy were all frightened by this. Feeling the threat, their bodies trembled and their bodies turned cold. The most terrible thing is that this young man not only has a terrifying foundation and amazing combat power, but also has many life and death friends at the peak of the true sage realm. For Lin Sun, they even dared to completely fall out with the Golden Crow bloodline and directly start a war. Alas, in the future, no matter who or what force in the ancient desolation realm, I'm afraid that they will all live under the shadow of this young man. At the beginning, he was just a humble practitioner from the lower world. He was decisive and unscrupulous, and no one paid attention to him. But now, he is like the sun in the sky, shining alone. He is incomparable and irreplaceable. Perhaps only those monsters on the starry sky ancient path can suppress Lin Sun. All kinds of comments, sighs were constantly heard in the major areas and cities of the ancient desolation realm. The Wind Talking Clan, which was famous for its well-informed information, compiled some of Lin Sun's past deeds into a book and spread it around the world. For a time, Lin Sun's reputation was pushed to an unprecedented height. In the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival, he was the first. In the list of junior giants, he was the best. In the Absolute Summit Domain, he was the first on the Tianjiao Golden List. In the Nine Regions Battlefield, he was the first on the Nine Regions battlefield. In addition, some old events were also brought up, such as the grievances between Lin Sun and Yun Qinbai, the Black Sea Dog Clan, the Sea Soul Clan, the Beast's Spiritual Mountain, the Xuandu Taoism sect, the Heavens Pivot Holy Land, the Spiritual Treasure Holy Land, and so on. For a time, wherever there were people in the world, Lin Sun's deeds were spread. Who in the world didn't know him? While the outside world was in turmoil, Lin Sun, Old Toad, Alu, and the Big Blackbird had already bid farewell to their friends and returned to the Star Chess Sea from the Sunset Tang Valley. The changes in the world, the ups and downs, seemed to have nothing to do with him. On an island reef in the Star Chess Sea, Lin Sun was meditating in a wooden house. When he went to the Sunset Tang Valley, Lin Sun had firmly grasped the opportunity to break through the realm. It was not until the battle with Wu Hengzhen that he triggered the heaven's retribution and broke through the realm. It seemed easy, but in fact, it was a natural thing to do after a long preparation. Others only saw him swallowing the heaven's retribution and controlling it, but no one knew how much effort Lin Sun had put into this breakthrough and how much preparation he had made. All strength couldn't be obtained casually. As the ancient sages said, there was no such thing as easy in the eyes of the truly strong. Behind any dazzling glory, there was an unknown effort. As soon as he returned to the Star Chess Sea, Lin Sun began to meditate in seclusion to stabilize and temper his cultivation that had just broken through the realm. The great saint realm was big and boundless, but it was known that the power a cultivator could control was limited. The key to how to have boundless power lay in the word space. Only when one reached the great saint realm could he have the qualification to comprehend the great way of space. For Lin Sun, his future path was to comprehend and control the profound meaning of space as soon as possible. The two moves of the void-breaking finger of divination, boundless world, and so near and yet worlds apart, are imprinted with the mystery of space. When I reach the great saint realm, I can naturally use the method of space shifting. It's just that these mysteries were known to me in the past, but I didn't know why. After all, I couldn't control the mystery of space, so it was impossible for me to pry into the essence of the mysteries. However, when I comprehend the power of space, I can start from the void-breaking finger of divination and space shifting. In this way, I might be able to comprehend the power of space as soon as possible. Lin Sun meditated as he meditated. Only by controlling the power of space could he set up the Tao field when he stepped into the King Saint realm, and then he could go further in the search for the Great Way. It was no exaggeration to say that the Great Saint realm cultivated the power of space. Only in this way could he have a great and boundless foundation. Lin Sun's cultivation was at the early stage of the Great Saint realm, and the power of the Great Way he controlled had already transformed into the Great Saint Law when he broke through the realm. Compared with the past, it was naturally completely different. To give a simple example, from now on, even the old monsters of the true Saint realm, who had lived for many years, would address Lin Sun as Senior. Just like Lin Sun, Old Toad, Alu, and the others also began to cultivate in seclusion after they returned. The fact that Lin Sun had reached the pinnacle of the Great Saint realm gave them a great deal of stimulation, and they were afraid that they would be left far behind and would never be able to catch up to Lin Sun again. Therefore, they all mustered up all their energy to break through the realm and reach the pinnacle of the Great Saint realm before heading to the Kunlun ruins. Even Little Silver and Little Tian worked even harder. Only the big blackbird was very lazy, or it could be said that it had almost never cultivated diligently. Ever since it returned to the Star Chess Sea, it was either sleeping soundly or flying away. It might not return for 3 to 5 days, acting mysteriously, and no one knew what it was busy with. Time passed in this peaceful and fulfilling atmosphere. Everything that happened in the outside world had nothing to do with them. Unknowingly, half a year had passed. Over the past half a year, the news that Lin Sun was cultivating in seclusion in the Star Chess Sea had somehow spread, and it attracted countless cultivators. It was not the height of the mountain that mattered. It was the same for the Star Chess Sea. This place was originally a dangerous place that no one dared to enter. However, as the news of Lin Sun's residence spread, this sea became a place of pilgrimage in the hearts of many cultivators. Chapter 1734. On this day, there were still many cultivators appearing on the shore of the Star Chess Sea. There were rogue cultivators carrying swords, disciples riding spiritual birds, and heirs of orthodoxies going out in groups of 3 or 5. Almost all of these people came on a pilgrimage just to see what kind of pure land it was where the legendary Great Saint Lin Sun lived. But most of them were young boys and girls following their parents and elders. The older ones were 15 or 16 years old, and the younger ones were still 5 or 6 years old. These people came here hoping that their juniors could be apprenticed to Lin Sun for cultivation. Of course, the hope was doomed to be slim. Because these days, no one knew how many disciples came with the intention of apprenticing to Lin Sun. But in the end, not to mention apprenticing, they couldn't even see Lin Sun's face. But even so, it still couldn't stop the cultivators from all walks of life, who hoped that their sons and daughters could become dragons and phoenixes. Among them, there were many disciples from famous families and major sections. They were the best in talent and material quality. It could be seen how great Lin Sun's reputation in the ancient Desolation realm was now. It was no exaggeration to say that in the hearts of the cultivators below the Saint realm, Lin Sun was like a god in heaven. One person was equivalent to an ancient orthodoxy. Moreover, Lin Sun was the only great saint in the ancient Desolation realm. If they could be apprenticed to Lin Sun, they wouldn't have to worry about the Great Way in the future. Therefore, during this period of time, cultivators from all over the world could be seen bringing along their juniors in the vicinity of the Sea of Star Chess. It was a rather magnificent sight. Even if no one could see Lin Sun's face so far, who would give up because of this? There was hope after all. What if? Yes, if they were lucky enough to be chosen by Lin Sun at first sight, wouldn't their juniors soar to the sky and rise rapidly? It was precisely because of this that many cultivators came to try their luck, even if they knew the hope was slim. They couldn't be stopped, so the Star Chess Sea became extremely lively. The Star Chess Sea was covered with a dreamy mist, as if it was covered with a mysterious veil. Numerous cultivators were waiting at the shores of the ocean, and they raised their heads in anticipation. We came from Fu Guang City in the southern mysterious world and traveled tens of thousands of miles. We've waited here bitterly for 49 days, but we still haven't had the chance to see Senior Lin soon. A middle-aged man in a luxurious robe sighed. At his side there was a youth who was heroic and extraordinary, outstanding among his peers. Humph, 49 days is nothing. I have been waiting here for 3 months. As long as my grandson has a glimmer of hope to become Senior Lin's disciple, it's worth it for me to wait here for 3 or 5 years. A purple-robed old man who obviously lived like a prince sneered. A group of powerful lackeys followed by his side, and a 7 or 8-year-old child stood by his side. Yes, Senior Lin is like a god in heaven. How can it be easy to be apprenticed to Senior Lin? Let us wait silently. Only then will we be able to show our sincerity. Many people nodded and agreed with the purple-robed old man's words. But this is just our wishful thinking. What if Senior Lin never wants to take us as his disciples? Someone suddenly said. His words caused everyone to look at each other in dismay and silence. But what if Senior Lin takes a fancy to us? Someone couldn't help saying. What if? This word was like a wisp of incomparably ethereal hope, but even so, it was enough to attract many people to work hard for it and refuse to give up. For a time, everyone present had different thoughts. Waiting was torturous, but no one was willing to give up just like that. There was no lack of great figures that were renowned amongst the cultivators present here. They possessed respected statuses, monstrous authority, and were all powerful. But on the shore of the Star-Chess Sea, they could only wait obediently. No one dared to act rashly, let alone force their way in. Compared to Lin Sun, they were just a group of ants. The cultivators present still had this understanding. How powerful the Golden Crow clan was, but it was also destroyed by Senior Lin Sun. Su Bai, why don't you go? In the distance, a girl looked at her companion who stopped and asked. The girl was dressed in a plain dress, and her long lavender hair was coiled into 2 buns, hanging obliquely beside her small ears. Her eyes were as clear as autumn water, and she looked pure and beautiful. As she spoke, she put her jade-like hands behind her back, and her slender waist leaned back slightly, giving her a delicate and lively feeling. The girl's companion was a young man in gray clothes and straw shoes. At first glance, it was obvious that he was from a poor family, but his clothes were very clean, and he was also very tidy, giving people a simple feeling. The young man in straw shoes looked into the distance worriedly and said, "There are so many people, and each of them seems to be much stronger than me. I'm not confident. Sister Bug, why don't we go back?" The girl patted him on the shoulder in exasperation and said, "Su Bai, can you be a little more ambitious?" The young man in straw shoes blushed and said, "Sister Bug, I'll listen to you." The girl smiled happily, looking beautiful and beautiful. Her purple hair fluttered, and she looked like a delicate and lively little fox. "That's right. Maybe your talent isn't as good as others, but you can definitely be a clumsy bird that flies first." The young man in straw shoes took a deep breath and said firmly, "It doesn't matter whether the clumsy bird flies first or not, but I'll definitely work hard." As they talked, the two arrived at the place where the crowd had gathered. Suddenly, a young man in embroidered robes sneered and said, "It doesn't matter if you don't have talent. There's no shortage of idiots in this world who are more ambitious than the sky. Everyone thinks that hard work can make up for their lack of talent and that heaven rewards their diligence, but in the end they're still ordinary and can't be compared with other cultivators. This is the great way, and it has always been so cruel. It's absolutely wishful thinking for those with poor aptitude to want to go against heaven and change their fate." The young man in straw shoes was taken aback. He knew that this person was mocking him, but he did not refute it. Only his eyes dimmed slightly. In the end, he was still a teenager and had come from a poor family. No matter how tough his mind was, it was impossible for him to be indifferent to sarcasm. Even more people merely glanced at the young man in straw shoes before their gazes descended onto the young woman in a simple dress, and their eyes couldn't help but be suffused with unusual expressions. What a beautiful young lady with an outstanding temperament! Many young men revealed expressions of interest, and they sized up the young woman from top to bottom in an unbridled manner. Amongst the people present, there were even a bunch of rich and noble clans that were renowned throughout the world, and they'd seen many beauties in the world. But the appearance of the young woman in a simple dress was so superb that it caused their eyes to light up. If nothing unexpected happens, she ought to be a descendant of the nine-tailed heavenly fox clan. This clan is innately charming, and every single one of them is a beauty capable of bringing calamity to a kingdom. If this young woman succeeds in her cultivation, then the charm she emits is sufficient to cause the heart of saints to sway and be difficult to control. The burning gazes of some great figures saw through the origins of the young woman in a simple dress. These words alone caused many exclamations of surprise in the surroundings, and the gazes they shot at the young woman in a simple dress became even more different, and there was no lack of greed and burning desire within them. The young woman in a simple dress had a calm expression as if she'd long since been accustomed to this sort of unusual gazes, and she only brought the young man in straw shoes closer to the bank of the Star-Chess Sea. As they walked, she exhorted in a low voice, "Su-bai, pull yourself together. All those years ago, Big Brother Lin was just like you. He had no one to rely on, was alone, and was unknown. But now, who doesn't know his name in the ancient Desolation domain?" The young man in straw shoes said in a low voice, "Sister Bug, I can't compare to Senior Lin. At least an idiot like you knows your limitations, and you aren't extremely stupid." The young man in embroidered clothes sneered. He seemed to be rather fond of sarcasm and ridicule, and his mouth was rather crafty and vicious. However, no one dared to criticize him, because the great figures present here had discerning eyes, and they'd long since recognized this young man in embroidered clothes. He was Shui Yong, a direct descendant of the Shui clan that was known as the Saint Path clan in Dongxing world. Even though Shui Yong was only 15 or 16 years old, he actually possessed superb natural talent and intelligence, and he was regarded as the Qilin son of the Shui clan. It was rumored that many ancient orthodoxies had taken the initiative to accept Shui Yong as their successor, but all of them had been rejected without exception. For a time, this had become a topic that people took delight in talking about. The young man in straw shoes clenched his fists, and a touch of anger emerged in his eyes, but he still restrained himself. He had long known that it was not easy for a poor and lonely child to survive, and he had no right to be angry. Otherwise, he would bring great trouble to himself. The girl in plain dress frowned and glanced at Shui Yong, the young man in embroidered clothes, and then looked at the young man in straw shoes beside her. She could not help but sigh softly in her heart. She whispered to the young man in straw shoes, "Su-bai, you're right to choose to endure. You're very weak, and this is a fact that can't be denied. But you have to remember that if you want to be respected by others, you have to become stronger than them. At that time, they will only envy you, revere you, and respect you." The young man in straw shoes nodded firmly, and his eyes brightened a lot. He said, "Sister Bug, I won't let you down." The girl in plain dress patted the shoulder of the young man in straw shoes and said with a smile, "Don't let the future you be disappointed with the present you." Seeing this scene, Shui Yong snorted disdainfully and said leisurely, "Girl, you're so kind to this idiot, but in my opinion, his life has long been sealed, and he is doomed to have no hope of rising on the road of the Great Tao. Instead, it's better to tell him and let him give up. On the contrary, he can live a muddle-headed life in the mortal world." Although these words were harsh, everyone quite agreed with them when they heard it. It was not a bad thing for stupid and ordinary people to have ambition, but if there was no great talent to match the ambition, it was doomed to be a disaster and would only harm themselves. Countless bloody facts in the world had already proved this point. How many ambitions and bones had been buried on the road of cultivation? Crack! Shui Yong patted his forehead and suddenly seemed to think of something. With a strange expression, he said in surprise, "Girl, I suddenly remember that you don't want to bring this idiot here to be apprenticed to him, do you?" As he spoke, he couldn't help laughing, as if he felt it was ridiculous. Senior Lin is such a great figure. How could he take a fancy to such an idiot? His voice was raised, with an exaggerated tone. Many people nearby laughed with a teasing look on their faces. The young man in straw shoes lowered his head, and his cheeks turned red. Obviously, he was suppressing his inner anger. The girl in plain dress looked cold little by little. Chapter 1736. The strong looked down on the weak, which was a common thing in the world, from ancient times to the present. Especially for those in high positions or from extraordinary families, they naturally had a sense of superiority in the face of those who were inferior to them. Just like at this moment, Shui Yong seemed unscrupulous in front of the boy in straw shoes. His words were not so vicious, but they were full of sarcasm and disdain. The boy in straw shoes was angry but did not dare to be angry, so his depression could be imagined. As the saying went in the world, if the weak wanted to survive on the big road, there was no other way but forbearance. The girl in the plain dress couldn't help but sneer, "Look at how proud you are. Do you think you can be apprenticed successfully?" Shui Yong was stunned, but he was not angry. He said with a smile, "No matter how unbearable I am, I'm thousands of times better than this idiot. If Senior Lin wants to accept me as an apprentice, my chance is destined to be thousands of times better than this idiot." The girl in the plain dress snorted coldly. Although she was successful in cultivation, she was not good at fighting with words. She wanted to retort, but after all, she was a little powerless, so she was quite annoyed. Shui Yong's eyes brightened. The purple-haired girl in front of him was undoubtedly extremely beautiful, pure and beautiful. Even when she was angry, she had a unique charm. For a moment, his heart swayed, and an uncontrollable desire arose in him. He had secretly made up his mind to find an opportunity to subdue this charming little beauty. Su Bai, don't pay attention to this person. No matter how talented he is, he won't be able to achieve anything in the future. The girl in the plain dress comforted the boy in straw shoes. "Sister Bug, I understand." The boy in straw shoes showed a smile. However, in the eyes of the girl in the plain dress, that smile caused her nose to sting. Speaking of which, when she passed by a village attacked by a herd of beasts, she saw the boy in straw shoes who was fighting bravely with the fierce beasts at that time. He was so weak, but he was so brave at that time. So, she saved the boy in straw shoes. After a little conversation, she learned that the reason why the boy fought so hard was that his parents were killed by the fierce beast. As a son, he should take revenge, so he didn't care about life and death. From then on, out of sympathy and appreciation, the girl in the plain dress decided to help the boy named Su Bai. Because she was going to visit Lin Sun, she took the boy in straw shoes with her. She also hoped that if the boy in straw shoes could be chosen by Lin Sun, it would be the best result. Even if she didn't like him, it didn't matter. As long as she was there, she would definitely help the youth in straw shoes on his path to the Tao step by step. If she really thought about it, perhaps all of this was driven by sympathy, but more importantly, the youth in straw shoes had a unique nature that she quite agreed with. It was tenacity, purity, and simplicity. Among the cultivators of the world, there were too many scheming thoughts. There were too few who were as pure as the youth in straw sandals. The rarer a thing is, the more valuable it is. The same goes for people. The girl in the plain dress felt that she had picked up a treasure, so she had to take good care of it. She did not care what other people thought of the youth in straw shoes. Along with the passage of time, Shui Yong lost the interest to ridicule and mock the idiot, and he only glanced at the young girl in a plain dress from time to time. The other cultivators in the vicinity were the same. They wouldn't even be interested in paying attention to such a young man in straw sandals if they encountered him somewhere else, and they would directly ignore him. The reason why they still glanced at the youth in straw shoes at this moment was none other than because of the young girl in a plain dress. "Sister Bug, are we going to keep waiting here?" asked the youth in straw shoes. He looked at the star-chess sea in the distance that was suffused with mist, and he felt that once he stepped into it, he would definitely be lost in an instant. "Don't worry, I'll think of a way," the young girl in a plain dress muttered to herself, and she was rather perturbed in her heart. She hadn't seen Lin Sun for many years since they parted last time, and she didn't know if he, who was famous all over the world, still remembered her, a silly girl. Thinking about it, she was really silly and ignorant at that time, like a simpleton. If it wasn't for him sending her off and taking care of her all the way, she was afraid that she would have lost her life long ago. When she came out of her closed-door cultivation this time and heard that Lin Sun was living in seclusion in the star-chess sea, she suddenly had an indescribable conflict and wanted to meet him. But when she really arrived here, she hesitated. At that time, Lin Sun was just a small cultivator in the sea spirit realm, and she was just a young girl who was ignorant of the affairs of the world. But now, Lin Sun was famous all over the world, a legendary figure like the sun in the sky. He was a peerless saint admired by countless practitioners. Does he still remember me? If he sees me who comes rashly, will he still smile and rub my head like he did in the past? Suddenly, a holy aura came from afar, and the air carried a strand of refreshing fragrance. Everyone present was stunned, and they looked over. In the sky, a strand of dazzling rain of light drifted down, and it swiftly transformed into a young girl in a yellow dress with a graceful figure. She had curved black brows, a sharp chin, a pair of sparkling and intelligent eyes, and a beautiful appearance like a celestial maiden. Her dress fluttered in the wind, and it vividly outlined her graceful figure. Everyone held their breath and revealed a dazed and infatuated expression. So beautiful! This woman had a unique kind of beauty, and her temperament was otherworldly, like a celestial maiden that was above the mortal world. But her figure was graceful, her waist was slender, and her brows were curved, causing her to imperceptibly emit an indescribable allure. She was like the combination of a witch and a celestial maiden, and it shocked the hearts of others. With her arrival, a holy and tranquil atmosphere appeared between heaven and earth, and wisps of refreshing fragrance filled the air, which made the hearts of those big shots sway. "Sister Bug, is she a celestial maiden?" The boy in straw shoes opened his eyes wide. He had never seen such a beautiful person, which made people feel ashamed of their inferiority and dare not have any blasphemous thoughts. "Little brother, you have a sweet mouth." Before the girl in the plain dress could speak, the girl in the yellow dress in the void couldn't help laughing. Her big eyes and red lips were so beautiful that it was suffocating. This celestial maiden, Shui Yong, couldn't help but speak, with love and fanaticism in his eyes. But halfway through his words, his mouth was covered by the elder beside him, who scolded him, "Don't be rash." Shui Yong was still unconvinced, but when he saw his grandfather, an old monster of the saint realm of Shui family, who brought him here, was nervous and dignified at this moment, his heart thumped and his face suddenly changed. He realized the problem. This beautiful woman, who was like a celestial maiden, was probably an extraordinary existence. The girl in the yellow dress just glanced at him, and then she paid no attention to him and directly disregarded him. Just like before, everyone present had disregarded the boy in straw shoes in a very casual manner, yet they gave off a feeling of supremacy. "Brother Lin, I've come to pay a visit." The girl in the yellow dress stood in the void and looked at the star-chess sea that was suffused with mist in the distance, and she spoke softly. Her voice was like the clear cry of an oriole that left the valley, pleasant and melodious like the sound of nature. The expressions of many cultivators became even more dazed, and they were completely stunned by the appearance, actions, and voice revealed by the girl in the yellow dress. But there were also many great figures whose bodies shook. These words allowed them to realize that the girl in the yellow dress was surely Lin Sun's good friend. So long as Lin Sun appeared, it would be the opportunity that they'd been waiting bitterly for these past few days. Swish! On the star chess sea, the mist suddenly spread out. In the next moment, a tall figure appeared out of thin air. He had a handsome face, eyes that were deep like an abyss, and a plain and indifferent aura. It was Lin Sun. "Miss Hu, you've finally come." Lin Sun smiled heartily as he greeted her. The girl in the yellow dress said with a smile, "I was delayed by some trifles on my way to the ancient Desolation Realm. Please forgive me, Brother Lin." An old voice sounded, "Senior Lin, I'm from the Nye clan in the southern mysterious world. I've taken the liberty to come here with my son. Please forgive me." A gray-haired old man in a brocade robe saluted respectfully. As soon as he spoke, the others in the field also reacted. They were anxious and spoke one after another for fear that others would beat them to it. "Senior Lin Sun, I'm from the Zhou clan in the ancient continent of the Dongxing world." Senior Lin Sun. For a moment, all kinds of respectful and excited voices rang out in the field. Those great figures who could be regarded as overlords in the ancient Desolation Realm were more humble and respectful than the other at this moment. Such a scene caused the young man in straw shoes to be dazed and shocked in his heart. What was power? What was fame? That was it. Just like the divine dragon in the sky, as long as it appeared, it would make all beasts kneel down and obey it. Of course, what happened near the star chess sea in recent days couldn't be hidden from Lin Sun's eyes. He also knew why these people came. However, he didn't have any plans to take in disciples, so he didn't pay attention to these things. Hu teased with a smile, "Brother Lin, it seems that you're very impressive in the ancient Desolation Realm now." Lin Sun smiled. Just as he was about to speak, he caught a glimpse of a familiar figure. Dressed in a plain dress, her purple hair was tied up in two buns. She was pure and beautiful, like an orchid blooming in a deep valley, slim and graceful, bright and lovely. Even though she stood in a remote corner of the crowd, she was still very conspicuous. Lin Sun smiled from the bottom of his heart. He laughed and said, "Haha, you little muddle-headed worm is here too. Why are you waiting there like a fool? Don't you recognize me?" He was indeed very happy. When he first entered the West Hing territory of the ancient Desolation Realm, the first person he saw was this ignorant and pure Xia Xiaochong, an innocent girl who was always teased by him for being simple-minded. However, after not seeing her for many years, Lin Sun didn't expect this girl to appear by the star chess sea. Seeing Lin Sun's gaze and his warm and joyful smile, Xia Xiaochong, who was originally nervous, exclaimed and blushed, "Big brother Lin Sun, how could I not recognize you? Also, I'm not as silly as I used to be." Lin Sun couldn't help but burst into laughter again. The straw-shoes teenager was stunned. Only now did he realize that the big brother Lin Sun, that sister Xiaochong mentioned, was actually Senior Lin Sun. Everyone present was dumbfounded and stood there in a daze. Especially Shui Yong, the youth in embroidered clothes. He looked as if he was struck by lightning, his expression stiff and his eyes blank.